Yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, my husband had high blood pressure, and I didn't realize sleep had
It
to do
does.
with that.
It does. And so just, oh. That's not me, I didn't touch nothing. All right, so that slide was basically just talking about the, sleep hygiene tips, things to help improve your sleep. Do some light reading. That's something that's good, and not on a tablet or anything like that. You don't have to do light reading if you don't like reading, but do something that helps de-stress you or something that helps calm you down. We live in a world where it's like go, 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 go. So you need to kind of like calm your brain down and just like woosah. So maybe you can do some yoga, there's yoga nidra, which is a common type of yoga, or some stretching exercises. Make sure your room is cool, dark, and quiet, like a cave is what they say. No coffee. Say that again?
I said, thank goodness for some prayer.
Yeah.
Right? Less coffee. If you do drink coffee, make sure your last cup of caffeinated coffee is maybe by 1 or 2 o'clock. If you're going to bed at like 8, 9, 10 p.m.
That early?
Yes, that early, just because the caffeine.
Like 6 at night instead of drinking Pepsi or something, you know.
That still has caffeine, so the point is the caffeine that we're trying to limit, because that will keep you awake. And then you can do sleepy time tea, especially if you're having trouble sleeping at bedtime. Teas that have like lavender, peppermint, things like that at bedtime to just help you calm down. Chamomile tea as well.
Okay, can we talk about the no alcohol? Like wine, it's just
Okay, we'll still talk about alcohol, but no alcohol close to bedtime, because even though it can make you relax to go to sleep, it does not let you go into deep sleep. So you're only kind of like sleeping at the surface, and which is what you want to get into deep sleep, and which is where the restoration and all of those good things happen. So no alcohol too late at night.
I drink wine, and
It's-
wine is my nightcap.
It's still alcohol. All right, keeping a consistent sleep schedule as well. If you have a haphazard sleep schedule, your brain's not gonna know when it's time to go to sleep, and it's just gonna be all over the place, right? So if you go to bed at 10 and wake up at 6 every day, regardless, weekends or holidays or whatever, then when it's close to 10, you start to shut down because your brain knows this is time. And when it's close to 6, you start to wake up because your brain knows this is time. And it gets that all the things that it needs to get done in that window of time, the REM sleep, the S1, S2, all of those sleep phases, you get everything in that period of time. And then no lights, turning off the lights, and then no overeating. Your body can't be doing 2 things at the same time, trying to put you to sleep and trying to digest food. So that's why if you feel too full, sometimes it's hard for you to go to sleep.
That's why I'm not sleeping good. I love eating potato chips. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I just start eating them, you know.
Yes, that would affect your sleep.
Okay, it says easy reading. I love reading, but it's like whenever I read, it's like with my cognitive disorder I'm reading, and I'll forget what I won't understand anymore of what I'm reading.
Mhm.
So I'll go back to the previous.
So you keep going back?
Yeah.
So that's my problem.
Maybe at that point you need to
Until
turn.
I get it, but it's not getting. So I'm like, okay, close your book. That's
And then
my
go
time
to bed.
Close it.
Yep, that's exactly what's happening because you're shutting down already. Next slide, please. All right, next pillar we'll talk about is stress and mental health. And I like this picture. I got it from Google. I don't remember the source, but I liked it because of all of the range of emotions that can happen with MS. As you know, it is a neurologic illness, and it can cause changes in emotions. The pseudobulbar affect there, I've actually seen it happen once with a patient, and we were just talking and she just burst into tears, and she's just like, I don't know why I'm crying. And that's kind of like it's like an inappropriate reaction, either laughing or crying, and that can happen with MS.
That happens to me all the
Yeah,
time.
Yeah. And then we found out that depression and anxiety are strongly associated with MS. And managing this helps improve the outcomes. So either being on medication for it or being in therapy for it, for the symptoms of depression or anxiety, that can be helpful. And then that's something your PCP can screen for. They should be screening you for depression and anxiety for almost every visit. I know that my practice, we do that. And then we found that stress management also helps to improve symptoms and the disease activity as well. And doing these things can help improve your stress. Next slide, please. And these are some examples of stress management activities. And it could be walking, right? Walking, dancing. I have a patient who does something she calls U-Jam, and she just aggressively just dances. And so she's doing two things at the same time, stress management and cardio. Mindfulness, we talked about yoga, meditation. So it's kind of like soft belly breathing. Just there's so many breathing apps, Calm, Headspace, all of these things. Even YouTube, there are a lot of breathing, like just 2-minute breathings, and then you just do deep breathing. Or if you're kind of out and about, you feel a little stressed, you could just do what I call a 5-5-5 breathing, and it's just 5 counts to breathe in, 5 counts to hold, and 5 counts to exhale. So it's just doing that, and just it's something simple to remember. You don't need anyone to guide you through that. It's 5-5-5 breathing. It's 5 counts to inhale, 5 counts to hold, and 5 counts to exhale, and that just kind of helps relax you. Yeah.
Hold on, wait. Can you repeat that again? I'm writing this down. Hold on.
Five. It's 5-5-5.
Wait, the first 5 is
5 to inhale. So inhale for 5, hold for 5, exhale for 5, and that just doing that in
What
cycles.
was the other 5?
Inhale, hold,
Inhale.
exhale. Yeah.
Wait, I said put inhale the first one. Okay, wait. I can't wait. Was that
Inhale.
right? Other one.
And hold.
Okay,
And then-
the other one's hold.
Yeah, and then exhale.
Okay, thanks guys.
Alrighty, you're welcome. And then the social support, just talking to people, listening, volunteering. Even though it seems like you're doing more by volunteering, but there's a way you feel after you do something good for someone else, and that can help relieve stress as well.
That's why having a caregiver helps out a lot, because communication is everything.
Yeah.
It's everything to me.
Yeah.
Because it's like, cause I'll start to lose it, but it's like communicating everything helps so much more better, and it
Yeah.
helps me.
It
helps
does.
my mood and everything.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Journaling and stuff too.
You like what?
Yeah.
Like journaling.
Journaling,
Oh, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
journaling.
Yeah.
I actually have an example of my stress management activity. Next. This is me.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like
Oh,
coloring.
that's
Nice.
Yeah, I'm so proud of myself. That's why I had to print. I was like, this is the only opportunity I can show people. And this is just, I just bought this cheap, it's like $10 on Amazon. And I bought this other like coloring pencils, and I just listen to like an audio book or a podcast or something, and I'm coloring.
Frequency
And I just feel so,
too.
yeah.
So nice.
And I just look, it makes me feel so good.
So you did that?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did.
I like that.
Very
Thank you.
I think the only thing you have to worry about is the next color.
Yes, yes. It's like I step back and I'm like, I see green here. Right? And this is just kind of like what my stress relief. And then in the middle of the day while I'm working, obviously I can't color while I'm seeing patients, so I just have music playing in the background. I'm Christian, so I do listen to a lot of like gospel music, so I have that in the background, and sometimes it's like praise music. I go back in my office, do a little dance before I go see the next patient, right? Next slide, please. All right, so substances. I did talk about alcohol, but first, tobacco is always bad for health. That's one thing that I would say. If you do smoke, try as much as possible to quit. You can help. There's a quit line, there's patches, there's Chantix, there's Wellbutrin, all of these things to help you quit. It does worsen disability in MS.
I thought Wellbutrin was an antidepressant.
It is an antidepressant, but it also helps work on the receptors in the brain that reduce your craving for things.
Because my doctor was giving it to me and I told him it wasn't helping.
Oh, okay.
And he put me on something else and it was just worse than the other.
Oh,
But don't
well, you must, what now?
Don't shrink the vessels or something?
They do.
In the,
And then it also worsens the blood supply to the
That's
nerves.
what I mean, uh-huh.
Yeah, so that's something else that happens. And then alcohol can be okay in small quantities, right? But it can increase your risk of vascular disease. So alcohol also does the same thing with like narrowing the vessels and the blood supply to the nervous system, which can in turn worsen the disability with MS. And then obviously all recreational substances for general health
I've been
purposes.
diagnosed with mine for like about 12 years. I've been doing good with my little bit of wine. I just have a couple of wine and I'm good.
Okay. Okay, but that's the thing. Let's see the standard drink sizes. I feel like people don't follow the standard drink sizes. Have you seen? It's like, oh, I only have a glass of wine and then the glass is this big. But yeah, it should be 5
If you
ounces.
only have a small glass of wine.
Yes, 5
so
ounces.
Me drinking 2, 3.
That might be, if you drink, so CDC's recommendation is for women, once again, 7 servings of alcohol for the week and 14 for men.
That's
Well,
Se-
then I'm not too bad.
Yeah, but that's 7 5-ounce glasses of wine or 7, like max a whole 6-pack for the week. But I've noticed that a lot of people do a 6-pack per weekday of the weekend, per day of the weekend. So that's a lot more.
My mother's next door neighbor did that. He could sit out there with a 6-pack of beer.
Yeah, a lot of
and
people do
just,
that.
Like, you know, like it was nothing. And with
Right.
me, I'll drink a glass of wine and I won't drink another one for a few days.
That's fine.
So I figured I was doing okay.
I want to
Yeah.
be like you when I grow up.
I know what it is.
Next
like,
slide,
I'll
please.
drink a glass of wine and then like, it'll
All
be
right,
a few
social
days.
connection. This is also one aspect that might be a little underrepresented in a lot of things. So I was very happy when she talked about connection with the MS program. Just having that social support, like I love this. This is so amazing. Just people who understand kind of like all of your symptoms, they understand what you're going through, and you just feel, even if they're not solving the problem, but sometimes you just feel heard and seen, and that just gives you a little bit more energy. That gives you a little bit more fight in you to fight this, right? And that just helps with your emotional health. Connections help reduce your heart disease. It helps with boosting your immunity. If you've heard of the blue zones, these are the locations all over the earth that people have lived the longest. One of the locations is actually Loma Linda in California. And then I think there's someplace in Greece and someplace in Italy, someplace in Japan, and they've done this whole study on them. And one of the main things they find is that they have really good social connections. They always spend time together.
Yeah, my grandmother had a friend in California and she would go out there for 2 months every year, and then she had a friend in Italy and she would go there and she would come back so happy. I was
Yeah.
kind of jealous.
Yeah, because the social connection piece is so helpful for you. All right, next slide,
Hold
please.
on, hold on,
Yep.
hold on.
Oh, sorry. You got it?
Okay, next slide.
Next slide, please. All right, so those were the 6 pillars that we'll just briefly talk about the summary real quick. But before then, weight management. Even though there is insufficient evidence for a correlation between excess weight and MS, some studies have noticed that being overweight or in the obese category can worsen the symptoms of MS. So for general health, it's always better to have an optimal weight. So this is also something you can speak with your PCP about if you do want to go on the weight loss journey. Next slide, please. All right, so these slides, these are kind of like the handouts that I have for you, and this is just kind of like summarizing all of the 6 pillars that we talked about. So you have the whole food, plant-based nutrition, the things to eat. Mushrooms were one class of foods I didn't talk about, but that's something that's really good. And then limiting or avoiding these foods. We talked about the sleep aspect and all of the things that you can do for sleep. We talked about physical activity. There's examples of both moderate activity and vigorous activity. Next slide, please. And then stress management tips, connecting with people, I like the second to the last point there, get a massage. That is something that I love that. If you
Never
do
had
like
one.
that,
Never had one.
never had one?
Because people always sit there and say, oh, I could give a massage, and they sit there and they're hurting me instead. So I'm
Tell
like,
them
you know
light
what?
pressure.
I'm like, you know
Light
what?
pressure
I
if you
don't
like
want
that.
it anymore.
And then we talked about social connection and then substance use. Next slide, please. All right, so I like this quote. I put this here this is one of the board certified lifestyle medicine physicians, and what she said was one of the most powerful aspects of lifestyle medicine is that patients become more engaged, active participants in their own self-care, disease prevention and management, and overall well-being. And that's basically giving you the power to fight the illness. Just because sometimes it kind of feels overwhelming and then you feel powerless. But with practicing the 6 pillars of lifestyle medicine, it's in your hands, and you can help manage your disease. You can help manage the condition by yourself without having to depend on someone else. You do need the connections, you do need all of these things, but it's not dependent on someone else. It's not outside of you, it's within you, right? Because you have that power on the inside of you. Next slide, please. All right, so to summarize, abiding by a healthy diet, exercising routinely, maintaining sufficient vitamin D levels, and abstaining from tobacco, nicotine use. So that, it also includes chewing tobacco, just needed to put that in there. And then incorporating stress management techniques, being active in the community, that's the social connections, and engaging in health maintenance, that's seeing your PCP, are all ways in which persons living with MS can improve their overall health and potentially impact their risk for long-term disability. I would like to add that, like I started with, the relationship between you and your PCP is very crucial. So if you do not feel comfortable with your current PCP or you have no PCP, find a PCP that you're comfortable with. I am accepting new patients, just a plug. But you don't have to travel if you live far away from me. You don't have to travel. But just so you can find a PCP that you're comfortable with, and work with them in achieving your own health goals. Next slide. So I do like to talk about Dr. Saray Stancic. She was in 3rd year med school in an overnight shift when I believe the story is that she suddenly couldn't move. So she rushed her down to the emergency room. She was in the right place, right? MRI, diagnosed with MS. She was already planning to be a doctor, became an infectious disease specialist, but then she found out that she could change her habits and change her lifestyle. She went completely vegan, all of that, and she has improved her quality of life. There is a movie or kind of like a documentary that she and some other lifestyle medicine doctors did, and it's called Code Blue. You can go on their website, that's right there. And then she also has a website, drstancic.com, and you can just look her up. So this is someone that is diagnosed with MS, and I believe she's been medication free for about 20 years.
Wow.
So there's just something interesting, and I thought that it would be interesting to look her up. Next slide, please. Any more questions? I know it's kind of like answering the questions in
I
between.
know, you did an amazing job.
Yeah.
I had a billion
A
questions.
billion, okay.
No, I don't. I just want to see your expression.
Oh no, it's fine. I want you to get the information. I want you to understand what I'm saying. Yes.
So,
yeah.
First question.
Go ahead.
Out of 100. First question. What was that, because I'm a talkative person. I love talking. I love receiving information. I love just talking about everything. But, you were talking about, also forgive me, because I have a cognitive disorder. So it's like, I understood everything you said and everything. So it's like, if you said something and I'm asking a question, but it's like, yes, see, that's a cognitive technique, because I don't even know what the heck I was gonna say, but it's all right.
It is all right.
What was I gonna say? Oh, yeah. What was the whole point of me talking about I'm a talkative person and I love talking? That's a popular particular hobby of mine. But, what was the, cause I believe you said that there's a, app for something like you could be connected with someone, and this could be, someone that, you know, you can, your health, like, I already have a PCP, I already have my neurologist. Not call all my neurologists is people that work underneath them as sidekicks, that's what I call them. But they work all underneath them. But I only see my neurologist once a year. But you said that like,
A navigation thing,
Is it
a
navigation?
navigator, was that it?
yeah, I think so.
I think Margie had mentioned that.
No, it was Anne.
And.
It was Anne that mentioned the navigator. Is that what you were, someone to help you, like, kind of like navigate the different resources? Is that what you were trying to say?
Different resources,
They was talking like navigators.
Yes, there's information on the
That's what she
site
got
Okay.
information on.
to connect with the navigator.
Is that what you were asking?
yeah, that was.
That's what you were asking? Okay. Yes.
What's your opinion on fasting, like eating?
Intermittent fasting?
Intermittent.
I like it.
Thank
Yeah, I think it's a good
I'm
idea.
trying to do that. I'm
Yeah.
trying not to eat after 7 p.m.
That's beautiful. That's a good thing, yeah. I don't think the body was designed to eat 24 hours a day. If you think going back to our ancestors and the, you know, kind of like the cavemen and all, I don't know if we're actually cavemen, but they ate in a certain window of time. They killed the animal, whatever, got all their food, ate, and we're done. Because they didn't have like 24-hour electricity and refrigerators and all of that. So I don't think the body was designed to eat all food. So if you stop eating at 7, that's a really good health decision. And then there's a book I could refer you to. It's called How Not to Age. It's by Michael Greger. He's also one of the lifestyle medicine people, and he does talk about intermittent fasting as a way to prolong life. Actually, that's a lot of studies are coming up on that.
So intermittent fasting
Hmm.
is not, it's just stopping eating at a certain time?
It's eating in a window.
Oh, eating in a window.
Yeah. So some people do like 11 to 6,
Yeah.
9 to 4, something like that.
But you need like 14 or 15 hours for your body to
Mm-hmm.
work through everything you've eaten and clean it,
Yeah.
do its work.
Do its
without
work.
food.
Without food, absolutely. It's also a really good weight loss strategy because then you're limiting your calorie intake, and so you're not as far as now. The caveat is that you can't just eat everything that you want to eat, and that would be like, oh, I can only eat between 11 and 6, so I'm gonna have breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and a side in that window, right? It's still eating healthfully in that window.
You ready? Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I'm Pat Simons, and I'm here to introduce Sue Kushner. Susan has been a physical therapist for almost 4 decades. Her degrees are from the University of Pittsburgh and Columbia University. She has worked in a variety of clinical settings and has been on the faculty of Slippery Rock University for over 31 years. Her involvement in multiple sclerosis includes decades of volunteer work for the National MS Society, both with patients and on local and national committees. She has been a consultant with Can Do MS for over 30 years and has received a number of grants for educational exercise programs for Black persons with MS. She is passionate about this group of patients and hopes to continue working and speaking in this area. So I want to introduce our sister, Sue.
Thank you, Pat. And again, I wouldn't be here without Margie's help also. So welcome to the segment. It'll be 45 minutes long on education and fitness related to MS. So if you remember 2.5 hours ago to Dr. O speaking on wellness and the pillars of wellness, I'm just gonna bring up one thing that she talked about. We're gonna practice it. Just the 5, 5, and 5. So if everybody can just kind of anchor their sit bones, the bottom of your pelvis into your chair. Take a deep breath in over 5 seconds. Hold it. 5 seconds. Exhale 5 seconds. And let's just do one more. It's a calming, kind of centering type of breathing, so I won't talk during this one. And I am getting over laryngitis, so I'll try and talk as loud as I can. And I will be touching on some of Dr. O's other points, because they are so useful and so valid. So we are meant to move. That's just how we are created. Unfortunately, the way our lifestyle is and society, we are moving less and less, and it shows in poor health parameters. And it used to be just more elderly, or as we age and hit middle age and your metabolism is not as rapid, that's when people were experiencing the weight gain and the multitude of health issues that accompany that. Now with everything electronic and games, and people are just more sedentary, the statistics on obesity in youth in this country are staggering. 30 to 40% overweight, of that 30 to 40% obese in young people. So this is just setting people up for huge problems throughout life, and not just later in life, but earlier in life. Now the problem with MS is it's such a catch-22, it's such a conundrum. You can't move as well, so how do you stay active? And if you gain any weight, how you need to move to lose the weight, but you can't move as well because of the MS. But that's where my profession comes in the world of physical therapy, because we will find a way to make each one of you and each of you out there in the virtual world, we can find ways to help you move, be it modifying exercise and activity for you, be it assisting you with any pains that may be directly related to MS, or secondary. You can get some orthopedic and postural problems from weakness and spasticity. So we will find a way, or we will give you orthotic assistance, braces, canes, crutches, walkers, whatever, to help you move. We may introduce you to an aquatic program, and even if you don't think of yourself as a swimmer per se, we will find a way. So don't think, I can't do anything. Yes, you can. So, okay, next slide, please. So goals of this brief talk are symptom management for MS. I'm not going to go into the disease process much. That has been covered very well by Dr. J and Dr. O. Some treatments are, again, that was covered more by them, but I want to talk about some barriers to activity. I will touch on wellness and certainly exercise and yoga. Some of the programs that Margie and I have been running and we've gotten funding for are part educational and part exercise/yoga, just like today is all about. And again, don't think yoga, I've never done that. That's kind of, woo-woo, isn't it? Now, yoga, it's stretching for all intents and purposes. No offense to anybody out there who, it's their livelihood, because there are all kind of different avenues related to yoga, but we're going to keep it simple for what I'm talking about, just with stretching. Next slide. So why exercise? Because I have to. Yeah, that is a little bit of it, but because you need to, and eventually, hopefully, because you want to. And I'm really happy that I have always liked movement and exercise and activity. Like Dr. O was saying, how many people get cranky if they don't get a good night's sleep, which is most all of us. I get really cranky if I can't be very active. And a lot of people are like that. And your body releases some chemicals called endorphins, and that just really helps you feel great. And it seems like a catch-22, but I'm tired. If I exercise, I'm gonna be more tired. No, it has the opposite effect. Exercise, you're gonna have more energy, and that's all proven beyond a reasonable doubt through the world of exercise physiology and all of the studies that accompany that. Plus, we have to keep not only our actual muscles strong, but think about your heart as a muscle. We need cardiovascular fitness. That heart has to be pushed to work so that it is working all the days of your life and so that it is working well. Partly so I can eat what I want, and that's a great joy, always, especially we're heading to Thanksgiving week, just the time that we're doing this. Avoid gaining weight or gaining any more weight. To meet people. Now, people like to exercise in different ways. A lot of people love to go to the gym. It's their socialization. Other people like to put on, semi-hideous clothes, go into their basement or a family room or the extra bedroom and do their own thing, follow a video, whatever. So you have to find out what works for you and go with that. And of course, it may be a mix of what is easiest and most convenient for you. Personally, I go to a Y, have for years. I met 5 great friends probably 15 years ago, and they are some of my closest friends. We have a biking group. In the winter we hike, and it's been just an incredible asset to my life. And one of my friends from growing up, childhood, she said, I credit you with, instead of like socializing, going out to lunch, we always did something active. So think of it as a huge social outlet for yourself too. And again, you're with like-minded people. You're not going to be meeting at the bar every Tuesday and Thursday at 5. Instead, let's meet at the Y, or start our morning off that way, and then maybe just have coffee afterwards. So huge social network related to exercise and working out. And then to make those people that are nagging you, myself included too, make them happy. Get your partners, your family, they all want you to be healthy. And again, it's a nice social thing to do with your daughter, to do with your mom or dad or your spouse. Just get out there and be a little bit active. Next slide, please. Are your answers none of the above? Hopefully it's a mix of all of the above or pieces of all of the above. But the main thing I'm going to say repeatedly is, no matter what your limitation is, be it in the head, physically, we can help you overcome that. And like I said, all of us healthcare professionals, particularly I'm going to speak from the physical therapy world because that's been my career for a long time. Next, please. So why do we need to exercise? I'll just super quickly go through this. Everything from burning calories to, everyone has heard, use it or lose it. And boy, is that so true with your body. It's true with your car. If your car sat in the garage or outside for 2 years, is it going to kick over? Who knows? Is your body going to kick over? It might keel over, but is it going to kick over and kick into action if you do nothing but hibernate? At the same time, I will be emphasizing to listen to your body on bad days. When you're sick, I didn't do anything physically for a few days this week, getting over a head cold, etc. If you are in the middle of an exacerbation or coming out of it, again, use your common sense. You need to take it easy. If you just got out of the hospital, be it something MS related or something orthopedic related, you've got to once again start off slowly. And don't even get me started on the aging thing. I mean, even a scratch is slower to heal for me. Any orthopedic, anything, a cold, it just takes longer. You have to be patient. But again, we need to be persistent. And you need to grind through some days. Other days will be, you know, it might be a joy on a sunny spring day, or we just got out of a gorgeous fall. It's easy to get out, lifts your spirits. Weather that we're hitting now, not as inviting. Big stress reliever. Exercise is proven on a physiological and chemical level to be a huge stress reliever. Much better for you than reaching for the kettle chips and dip, my favorite vice. Wine, maybe my second favorite vice. Coffee, you know, just much better than other not so great habits. Quality of life measures related to MS. There is not one thing out there, I guarantee you, that shows that, oh, my quality of life is worse because of exercise. That just doesn't exist. Your quality of life will improve. You know, no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I mentioned socialization. We all want to remain independent living for as long as we can. Do you know anybody who is sitting around thinking, I can't wait to get into a nursing home, like I just can't wait? No, you know, we all want to maintain as much independence for as long as possible. And most of us do not want to rely heavily on other people. Even if it's the love of your life and you're together for 60 years, yeah, you still want some of your independence, or a lot of your independence. Same with if your neighbors, your spouse, your children, your parents, home health aides helping you. We all want to do as much as possible, usually, by ourselves. Enjoyment, I mentioned all kind of studies on how exercise boosts the immune system. Again, just battles all of the bad stuff that's out there. There's a lot of research that's super interesting on brain health cognition. I think Dr. O and Dr. J touched on that also. And then something in that whole realm called neuroplasticity, where you can reform some neural pathways in the brain through exercise that can help you cognitively to combat the MS. So I don't see any negatives up there, I don't think, correct? So no, there aren't any. So this is just, I like to throw in a little comic. He says, I've decided that I'm going to get more exercise. Can you get my barbells for me? So that's not the help we're looking for from your spouse. And next. So barriers to exercise. We all have our excuses. You know, I'm as good as anybody at coming up with them. And they are time. How do I fit this in? Especially for people who are in the prime of their life. Work, school, maybe work and school, maybe kids, maybe commuting, a lot of obligations. Volunteer here, church activities there. It's hard to fit it in. But if you really look at your daily schedule and think, how much time do I spend on my silly phone, iPad, computer, etc.? I bet you can cut out 15 minutes or 30 minutes of that per day and do activity instead. Or if you love Netflix or, you know, The Voice, I love The Voice, put that on and do some activity. Even if you're in a wheelchair, you can still move for that 20 or 30 minutes. Or do the activity that you're gonna do during that TV portion and then take a break on the commercials. So just, you know, think of that as finding and carving out some ways. Some people will just get up a little bit earlier, 15, 20 minutes earlier in the morning. Some people will use their lunchtime break if they are working, or even if you're not working, and do something then instead of sitting at your desk and gabbing with everybody. Just maybe go outside for a walk or do what you can. Other barriers, self-conscious about your appearance at a gym, well then find what you can do at home, or just go to Kohl's and get a couple more updated sorts of clothing or attire. Poor health, well, believe you me, your poor health is going to snowball to more poor health, more health problems with zero activity. Bad weather, again, there's enough you can do inside, online. Online is just incredible for what you can find on there. Wheelchair yoga, any activity to any level that you want. Dr. O mentioned HIIT, high intensity interval training. Thank you. Jeez. Yeah, HIIT, high intensity interval training. And that's been shown to be really effective in smaller bouts of time. You do something pretty forceful, even if it's in your chair. In this program we've done arm circles, a minute or two of that, your heart rate is up, you feel like your arms are gonna fall off, and then a little rest. So we're not talking 60 minutes, 5 days per week. The recommendations by the CDC and American College of Sports Medicine are in the ballpark of 150 minutes per week. So if you divide that by 7, it's about 21 or 2 minutes per day. So you can do 40 one day, take a day off. We like to recommend no more than 2 days on. If you're not feeling great, no more than 2 days off. Again, unless you're really sick or having any sort of exacerbation. But consistency and perseverance, they are a must. And how you get those is kind of just grit, moving forward even when you don't want to do it. Now, I'm not going to go into Dr. Brooke, who's later in the afternoon, talking about all kind of psychological ways to help yourself move forward. There's a lot of literature and people that can help you with that, but part of it is you just have to do it. Pat mentioned that for decades I've been a consultant with an organization called Can Do MS. It's now almost exclusively online, and you want to talk about resources galore, and it comes from having a can-do attitude. So, it's hard to give you a formula or a prescription for that, but like I said, a trainer, a physical therapist, psychologists, family members, we can all help nudge you along. But a lot of it just comes from within also. No adequate workout facilities, again, no excuse. I could give you 50 things in an hour to do over time in your house. Too weak to exercise, you can always start at a very low level and build up from there. Lack of energy is kind of in there. No exercise partner. Well, what Margie and I and the folks who have come to our programs have found out that, gosh, you get out there and you realize there are more people like you, like me, that have physical problems. And boy, do people get energy and support from one another. And we've seen, and you've all, everyone in the room, we've seen the improvements that some of the folks have made over the couple years that we've been doing these programs. Weight loss, stronger attitude, just like a can-do attitude. So it's just great. Next, please. So some barrier breakers. Oh, that's okay. So some of the things I mentioned already, think about the time of day. When are you higher energy? I'm a morning person. You couldn't drag me to the gym at 8 p.m. for anything. So I'd rather get up early, and I've been doing that for probably 35 or 40 years. I get it out of the way, one shower, that's it. If you have more energy at lunchtime, work that into your day. People fuss about sweating and hair and stuff. Just do stuff that maybe you aren't gonna get as sweaty. It's a little harder depending on where you live and the season, but just work it into your day. And again, you can do 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes at lunch, 10 minutes after dinner. Boom, you have 30 minutes of a workout done in a day, and you really hardly have noticed the time that it has taken you, nor the energy that it has taken you. So again, working in small increments. Heat sensitivity and hydration, really important with MS. I think probably 90–95% of the people have adverse reactions to a lot of heat and humidity, so work around that. I push swimming and aquatic exercises all the time. And again, you don't have to be a swimmer. You can just go in, walk. Of course, you're not going to go into a pool somewhere that is for people with arthritis that is like 92 degrees. You want it on the cooler side, but you can go in, you can walk fast, you can walk backwards, you can walk sideways. You can get those cheapo noodles from Walmart or somewhere, put 2 of those around you, go into the deeper end, kick for, you might start with 3 minutes and you're sucking wind. After a month of that, you can get up to 20 minutes, and boy, what a good aerobic activity that is for you. But keep in mind staying hydrated when it is warm. If you're on a stationary bicycle, have water near you. They also make these cooling towels and cooling packs, and even a cooling vest. It looks like, you know, a tiny little water ski vest that has cool water circulating through it. Some people like an ice pack on their neck when they're working out. So there are ways to really keep your body cool. Needless to say, you're not going to go outside in Phoenix, Arizona at noon and, you know, try and hike or anything. So just being very, very smart. The no pain, no gain theory, we don't like that. What we do in PT is we add no brain. So no pain, no gain, equal no brain. You don't have to kill yourself working out. It can be always a comfortable amount. We always talk about making sure that you could carry on a conversation when you're working out. You don't want to go too hard and crazy, unless you're doing something monitored like the high intensity interval training. But in general, don't go too crazy. Nothing should hurt physically or, you know, mentally. It shouldn't make you feel like I'm never exercising again in my life. Okay, and then next one. What I did forget to mention from the last slide was just you might need some mobility aids. You might be able to walk 4 times around your local high school track, which is a mile, with a wheeled walker with a seat. And you can just plop down and be safe if you are fatigued. I mentioned orthotics. You might need a brace for foot drop or a knee brace or something called Bioness, which everybody has heard of, those electrical stim units. So again, those are where we as professionals come into helping you with whatever adaptive and assistive devices that we can give for you to assist you. So the main components you want to think about to exercise, and they're all equally important. Strengthening, people tend to overlook strengthening. It can be truly just lifting weights. It can be lifting cans of soup. You hold a can of soup in your arms and do this for 30 seconds the first time, and you're gonna be like, oh my goodness. You can work up to a couple minutes. You can get very inexpensive equipment. I don't tell anyone to go get a $5,000 bike or treadmill or anything. You can get TheraBand, stretchy band, you can get a yoga mat. You can get what's called a physio ball or a Swiss ball to work out on. Ankle weights and wrist weights, very, very inexpensive. So don't ever think you have to spend a fortune on equipment. That is totally not necessary for strengthening. Our bodies weigh a fair amount. Our legs, especially, our arms weigh a fair amount. So again, I just keep, because the camera's here, I keep referring to something just like arm circles. Or in our programs, we have done just some marching in your chair. We use the tables. They're like, you know, just big conference tables. We'll do some walking around with those. Not so much for strengthening, that's great for balance, but just being creative. And again, that's where you might need some outside input, i.e. a physical therapist. Stretching and flexibility, I mentioned yoga. It is so important to stay limber, to keep your what we call range of motion. I think everybody has sat too long, probably today, driving somewhere. You know, we get tight. Our muscles every day contract, the tendons actually contract, and they need to be stretched daily. An example, if you're on a 5-hour car ride and you hit a rest stop once or twice in there, what's the first thing everybody does when they get out of the car? They just go, that feels so good. Because we are meant to have a nice S-shaped curve in our spine. When we are seated, driving, desk work, our lifestyles are way too much in sitting. We lose the curves we're supposed to have. So your body is just instinctively screaming at you, go the opposite direction. So that's why flexibility and stretching are so important. Everybody thinks, low back pain is due to tight hamstrings and tight back muscles. Yes, but that's only half of it. Those are your posterior muscles. We have all these muscles in front of us. These are your hip flexors, which bend your hip when you walk. You have quadriceps, the big thigh muscles. They have to be stretched too, because if the hip flexors get too tight from prolonged sitting or orthopedic problems, this is what happens to you. And then you get contractures, and they are almost impossible to undo. So stretching and flexibility, people just tend to ignore. Equally important. And what I love about yoga does have a little bit of mind portion to the whole teaching of yoga and practicing yoga. And it's so good for the head, quieting the body, and you're supposed to just be present in the moment with yoga, not thinking, and I teach yoga twice a week. You're not supposed to be thinking, okay, when I'm done here, I gotta run to this, I gotta pick the kid up, I tell people, when you get like that, snatch that thought and just kind of throw it away. So being present is really a big part of yoga. So yoga is a mind-body thing, but again, it's very much stretching, and I just love it. Balance and coordination, so crucial for everybody, particularly with MS. You may have weakness, muscle imbalances, spasticity. Everybody knows how bad a fall can be. It could, break an ankle. It could set you back several months. I'll give you, just like worst case scenario, you might break the bones. You might need surgery. Then you might have to be non-weight bearing for 8 weeks. Then you might be partial weight bearing 4 weeks, blah, 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 blah. Physical therapy, all this. So there goes like 6 months of your life that you very well may backslide because of a fall. So again, physical therapists and a lot of online things can help you with your balance. Now, one big problem with MS is the lack of sensation in the bottom of your feet. And we work on visual cues for that. We work on assistive devices, and again, just being smart. Like if I'm going into the grocery store and there's a little median with stones or mulch, and I want a little shortcut up and down that curb, no. Take the extra 15 steps because you don't want something stupid like that to happen. Again, the setbacks can be weeks and months. And of course, sometimes I go to the way worst case scenario, a fall hitting your head, or something like that, or God forbid, a spinal cord injury. So it is so super important to maintain and work on improving your balance and coordination, both on land and, like I mentioned, in our programs, or I tell people at home, if you have a long dining room table, a long kitchen counter, walk in all different directions. Life is not just always walking forward. Again, you step on a rock, it throws you sideways. You're at the grocery store and a little kid runs into you, or a shopping cart slams you from the side. You maybe have not moved sideways in a couple years, and you need to move in all directions. So I have people practicing sidestepping both ways, obviously forwards, backwards. Hang on to something, walk around your dining room table or 2 directions along your kitchen counter. Brushing your teeth, maybe lift a heel up and just have a toe on, so you're challenging your balance. Fingers on the bathroom sink. Over time, you might be able to completely lift up that leg and switch. So you're in the shower. If you feel safe, or even on a shower bench, get those arms back there and scrub yourself again, challenging your balance within the limits of safety. Always make sure there's something nearby to grab onto. If you're doing any standing exercises and you're really worried about falling backwards, have a chair back there. One that's not gonna flip backwards if you do fall into it. So common sense goes a long way with keeping yourself safe. And then, as I mentioned before, cardiovascular fitness. The heart is a muscle. How do we get muscles stronger? Pushing them, working them. So, next. Ways for strengthening, so many ways. Just come and see me or go to your local physical therapist. Resistance training can be with bands, weights, things just around your house can be very useful. As I mentioned before, your body weight and water activities. Everybody's been in a swimming pool or the ocean or a lake. If you walk slowly in the swimming pool, you're not getting a lot of resistance. If you try and walk fast, if you take a leg out to the side fast, you're gonna get a lot of resistance, and that is good. So that's how water can be used for resistive training.
Like water Zumba. Water Zumba.
A water Zumba, yes, thank you very much. Just water is great, as long as it's the right temperature. And next. Flexibility, I touched on these already. Stretching, yoga. Oh, Tai Chi is excellent. It's really great for the mind-body connection also, and balance. And again, you can find stuff online if you're not able to get yourself to a class, but yeah, Tai Chi is really a neat thing. I mentioned the Swiss ball, and then I think everybody has heard of Pilates. Oh, by the way, the Swiss ball is like $20, $30, not very expensive at all. And you can do so many things sitting on the ball, or you can lie on the ground, feet up on the ball, do bridging. You can put your belly over it, work on back strengthening. They also sell balls that are in the shape of a big peanut, like a peanut with the shell on it. So you can straddle the narrow part of the peanut for safety, or you can sit in the little groove of the peanut. So the peanut-shaped physiotherapy balls are great. And then I think everyone's heard of Pilates. There are Pilates studios that can be very expensive. They can be like $100 an hour. And Pilates is a form of strengthening, but the philosophy is lengthening the muscle while you're working it out. So what I mean by that is, okay, if I had a 10-pound dumbbell and I'm doing a bicep curl, this muscle I'm working gets shorter. But with Pilates, you work heavily on strengthening the muscle as it lengthens. And that's something people just really never think about unless they're taught that. So Pilates is lengthening. Now there's mat Pilates you can do on a yoga mat, on your bed or whatever. That is super inexpensive. You just need a little online program to follow. There are these Pilates tables with all kind of pulleys and stuff. Complicated and expensive, and I'm not saying don't do it, but don't think, I'm not spending, I personally am not spending $100 an hour. If I have that, I'm with Lindsay, I'm gonna go for the massage. So Pilates can just be very simple mat Pilates, but the whole philosophy is strengthening the muscles while lengthening them versus only contracting the muscle to strengthen. And next. Balance and coordination. I think I've mentioned just about everything already. And then a PT could help a person too with really specific vestibular exercises, especially if you have any inner ear problems that, really do throw your balance off. But don't think, are you kidding? Like 4 of these categories and all the, each category has 6 things, that's 24 things, how am I gonna fit this in, blah, blah. A lot of these activities incorporate a bunch of these things all at once. I mentioned water. You can work on balance, you can work on strengthening, you can do some flexibility exercises in there. So these are not mutually exclusive categories. A lot of things that we have people do incorporate a lot of them all at once. Next. And components of balance, your brain, huge. Your eyes, how is your vision? Once in a while we find someone just needs a pair of glasses to improve their balance. Your joints, we gotta keep those strong and relatively pain-free. Your muscles have to be strong, and again, not just certain groups, but overall body strength. Sense of touch is and feeling, what we call either proprioception or kinesthetic awareness, very, very important. And if you have issues like that, you definitely need to speak with your doctor and a physical therapist and ways to compensate for those areas. Okay. And then cardiovascular activities, gotta keep the heart strong, gotta burn the calories. Helps combat fatigue. I think everybody knows the less you do, you're gonna feel worse. You think, oh, my dream is to just lie on the couch all weekend. Well, you can get away with that for a weekend, but if you do that from now till Christmas, you're hardly gonna be able to get off that couch. Everybody, maybe we've all had a hospitalization at some point or another, and we are meant to move. We are meant to push ourselves. The more you push yourself, the more you combat fatigue. To a point. Of course, we all can overdo it, and then you kind of drop off a cliff with fatigue. And there's all sorts of types of ways to get cardiovascular fitness. Machines, even if your walking is not great, you can get yourself on a stationary bike, a recumbent bike, a rowing machine, an elliptical, in the pool. Again, I'm coming back to, I can give you a pretty darn good 15-20 minute cardiovascular workout seated if need be. So, next, in classes too. And then so many ways, so little time. I love this. Do you want to do Tai Chi or do you want Chai Tea? But I say you can do one, then have the other. And next, and then yoga. I mentioned enough already. Also, just find the type of yoga you like. There are so many different types. Don't get caught up so much in the name of it, but just find what you like. Mellow, a little faster. I will tell you, avoid hot yoga. It's not good for people with MS. I hate it. I did it once with a friend. She was visiting from Texas. We went to my first and only hot yoga class, and I mean, we were dripping. They jacked the room up to like 102 degrees. And we're in downward dog, like the upside down V, and dripping sweat. And she catches my eyes underneath our armpits and she mouths to me, "I'm going to kill you." I am not a big fan of hot yoga. Very little space or equipment needed. A mat. I like the blocks and I like the smushy ball that you can use in the back, in between your shoulder blades. But we're talking $40 or $50 tops for output of money. And next, and again, find something that works for you. If it works for you, I always say it works. And you might have to do a lot of trial and error like we do with everything in life. What clothes look better on you? What kind of partner do you want for life? So a lot of it is trial and error. And then keep your goals what we call SMART goals. Specific, what do you want to be able to do? Measurable, like, I used to be able to work out for 5 minutes, I want to get it up to 30, so you can measure that. Attainable, I don't think any of us in here are going to run the Pittsburgh Marathon next year. That's not attainable, so we're not going to make that a goal. Relevant, I want to be able to walk better. I want to be able to stay in my 2-story home. I want to walk, my granddaughter down the aisle for her wedding. And then time-based. Don't just think, in the 2020s, 28 or 9, I'm going to get it together. I'm going to really get my act together. No, how about think of doing something between now or the week of Thanksgiving and Christmas. You can make a little headway, and then of course, the new year. So make yourself some time-oriented goals. And I think that's about it. When you're struggling, be it a medical reason, talk to the people you need to. It might be an exacerbation. It might be a urinary tract infection. It might be you need a CPAP for sleeping better. You might have restless leg syndrome. So, talk to the people that you need to talk to if there may be a medical reason. Talk to your support partners, try and get help from those people that love you. Go to a support group, come to a program like ours is. And as I mentioned too, it's okay if you skip a day and your program is going to evolve. So many people have come back to me and said, this is too easy. Like, I need you to beef it up. And I'm like, oh yeah, we can do that. So that's always a good feeling. And I think that's about it. And I am going to turn things over to our next speaker. Oh, this is just make it enjoyable. Make it relatively fun. So.
3, 2, 1. Go ahead.
Is ready?
Yep, you're ready.
Hello, my name is Mary Hurd. I'm here to introduce Janelle Hall. She's a doctor in pharmacy, is a clinical pharmacist practitioner with the Duke University Hospital of Neurology Clinic. She received her Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of North Carolina Eshelman School of Pharmacy. She completed a I just know you're smart. But anyhow, pharmacy residency program with Vidant Medical Center and ambulatory care pharmacy residency program with the Novant Health New Hanover Regional Medical Center. Dr. Montgomery has worked with the multiple sclerosis and neuroimmunology team since 2016, where she provides MS medication, education, and helps patients start on disease-modifying therapies. Janelle H. Montgomery, Doctor of Pharmacy.
All right, let me share my screen. Hello, my name is Janelle Montgomery. I'm a clinical pharmacist with Duke Neurology Clinic, and today I will be providing an overview of multiple sclerosis disease-modifying therapies. I'd first like to start out and discuss my roles in an MS center. I know some people are familiar with having a pharmacist in clinic with their providers and some are not, so I wanted to provide an overview of the different responsibilities that I have. The first and the main thing is providing medication education. So if anyone has questions about disease-modifying therapies or symptomatic treatments, I'm available to answer those types of questions. I can help with lab monitoring and follow up as well. If someone is starting a new medication, I can help coordinate the new start, whether that is completing start forms, walking someone through the process of discussing insurance coverage, and kind of going from beginning to end to make sure that our patients are getting started on medications in a timely manner. I also see patients in clinic and via video visits for medication starts and follow-up visits. So it's nice to have a pharmacist in clinic so we can help with those clinical aspects of medication management. I also help, as I mentioned, with symptomatic medications as well as side effect management. So if somebody may be having a reaction to medication or need adjustments in pre-medications, I'm able to provide recommendations for those types of adjustments. And finally, monitoring coordination, making sure that labs are completed prior to starting treatment, as well as following up on labs that are needed after starting medications. So the way that this presentation is formatted is kind of in a frequently asked questions format. So first we'll go through the available disease-modifying therapies and their common side effects. And then we'll go through other questions that I frequently receive from patients and may be helpful information to you. So this is a timeline of currently approved disease-modifying therapies. You can see we have come a very long way and have much more options than we initially had about 30 years ago when we had our first disease-modifying therapies. You may be familiar with some of these. We have medications that you take by mouth, we have self-injections, we have infusions, so we have a variety of routes of administration, as well as mechanisms of action in order to help with our MS progression. Our newest medications that are disease-modifying therapies are ublituximab, or Briumvi is the brand name, and then we have a natalizumab biosimilar called Tyruko, and then a ocrelizumab subcutaneous injection called Zunovo. So we'll talk about each of these. Again, we'll go over the dosing as well as the side effects as well of all of these medication options. So this is a bit of a busy slide here, but the take-home point from this slide is you can see how many different ways that there are that these disease-modifying therapies impact MS. So the goal of all of these treatments is to prevent disease progression, prevent relapses from occurring, and there are different ways that these medications go to your immune system to prevent progression of MS. So we'll talk about mechanisms of action and high efficacy versus low efficacy medications. But the takeaway again is to show you how many different ways that disease modifying therapies work. We'll first start with glatiramer. Some may know this medication by its brand name or trade name, Copaxone or Glatopa. This is one of our first approved medications. It's administered subcutaneously once daily or 3 times weekly. Biggest side effect for you to take home is that it can cause an injection site reaction. It can also cause an injection reaction involving like heart palpitations and chest pain. So it's something to keep an eye out for. It can happen at any point in therapy. It can also cause, it's called lipoatrophy, but it's loss of fat tissue. We also want to make sure we're monitoring your liver over time to make sure there's no liver injury there. There's no specific lab monitoring recommended by the manufacturer, but again, for example, your liver is something that we may want to just keep an eye on over time. Excuse me. So, with the glatiramer, if you're on this medication, what we'd like to counsel you on is to use proper injection techniques. So make sure you rotate injection sites. On the right-hand side here, you can see the different options for the different injection sites. So it could be your thighs, your abdomen, back of your arm, or kind of the side of your legs, kind of the hip area. You want to make sure you're aware of that post-injection reaction I talked about. So it not only could be heart palpitations, but flushing, chest pain, anxiety, shortness of breath. This should be pretty self-limiting, so only lasting seconds to minutes after the injection. So, we want to make sure that you're aware that this is not a heart attack or something more severe that's happening. So if it kind of continues on and that becomes more concerning, you can certainly get checked out for that. But typically these type of post-injection reactions are fairly short with the Copaxone or the Glatopa, or if you're on the generic, the Glatiromer. The Glatiromer kind of has 3 different auto-injectors. What I'd like you to know is that if you have an auto-injector that the pre-filled syringes go into, it is recommended to replace them after a certain amount of time. And then also, you shouldn't use them interchangeably. So let's say you are on the brand name Copaxone, you should use the syringes that are associated with that medication. So for example, if you're on Glatopa, you should use the Glatopa Ject. And then after a period of time, you would want to replace these injection devices. We next have our interferons. So there are 4 different types of interferons available, and they range in how often they're administered and in which area of the body they're administered into. So for example, at the top, we have interferon beta 1A, brand name being Avonex. This is administered intramuscularly once weekly. While the next one, we also have an interferon 1A, which is Rebif, is the brand name. This goes into your subcutaneous or fat space as compared to the intramuscular space with Avonex, and it's administered 3 times weekly. The interferon beta 1B, brand name Betaseron, is subcutaneous every other day. And PEG interferon, which is Plegridy, is administered subcutaneously every 2 weeks. One thing we would like to let you know is, again, you could have injection site reactions with these types of medications. Also, one of the big side effects you see with interferons are flu-like symptoms. It can cause depression or worsening depression, so that's something for you to keep an eye out on. And then there's also some lab monitoring to do with this medication as well. We want to make sure you're using the proper injection technique, rotating injection sites. If you're having flu-like symptoms, you can use, if it's appropriate with any other medical conditions and your other medications, using pain or fever reducing medications such as acetaminophen, ibuprofen, or something like that to help minimize those types of side effects. And here is listed some recommendations for storage of the medication and how long they can be left at room temperature. Next, we have our class of medication called fumarates. We first have dimethyl fumarate, which is our oldest fumarate. Then we have diroximel fumarate and then monomethyl fumarate. Let's first start with dimethyl fumarate. It is a capsule that's taken twice a day. In terms of side effects, so biggest ones you may see are flushing and also gastrointestinal reactions. That might include abdominal pain, nausea, and diarrhea. There are labs to be monitored with this medication as well. Some counseling points to note. So if you're having some stomach issues, it's recommended to take it with food. You can take aspirin up to 325 milligrams 30 minutes prior to the dose to minimize flushing. We typically recommend starting on the lower dose of aspirin, the 81 milligrams twice a day, to see if that's helpful. And then if someone isn't tolerating the dimethyl fumarate, What you want to do is you can take a lower dose for longer, so up to a month before going up to the higher dose. And then we want to resume the higher dose within that 1 month time frame. So we can extend the time on the lower dose so your body has time to adjust to the medication. We then have diroximel fumarate, brand name Vumerity. This medication is taken twice a day as well. The biggest difference between the dimethyl fumarate and diroximel fumarate is the maintenance dose for the dimethyl fumarate is 1 capsule twice a day, while diroximel fumarate is 2 capsules twice a day. They have similar side effects, flushing, stomach upset, or gastrointestinal problems, and then similar monitoring as well. This one has an interesting counseling point where you want to avoid administering it with a high fat and high calorie meal. So you might want to avoid having a meal or snack that has more than 700 calories and 30 grams of fat. We, recommend, like, you don't necessarily have to calorie count and fat count, but if you know you're going to have a particularly high calorie or high fat meal, perhaps separating out the medication by a period of time, like maybe an hour or so, might be appropriate to make sure that the full amount is getting absorbed by your system. You want to avoid using it with alcohol. Again, we have the recommendation for aspirin if you're having flushing. And then we want to make sure that we check your kidney function before you start the medication, and while you're on the medication as well, as it's not recommended for people who have moderate to severe kidney impairment. One of the reasons that the diroximel fumarate was created was to improve the gastrointestinal side effects that you see with dimethyl fumarate. So the chemical structure of the diroximel fumarate causes less irritation to the GI tract, which is why you see less of those gastrointestinal side effects. So this chart on the left just shows you, in green, you have the dimethyl fumarate. In blue, you have the diroximel fumarate. So we look at the gastrointestinal symptom intensity score. You can see it's lower with the blue one, so the diroximel fumarate. Now, and on the right, you can see in terms of gastrointestinal disorders, again, the incidence is lower with diroximel fumarate. Now, it can still cause gastrointestinal side effects, but it should be less severe than the dimethyl fumarate. And then finally, we have monomethyl fumarate, which is actually the active ingredient that the dimethyl fumarate and diroximel fumarate turns into once it gets into your body. It is a capsule that's taken twice a day. Again, similar potential side effects like flushing or stomach upset, and similar lab monitoring, and similar recommendations. So to take with food to minimize stomach upset, the aspirin recommendation for flushing, and then you can decrease the dose if you need a longer period of time for your body to adjust to the medication. Next, we have teriflunomide, brand name Aubagio. It's a medication that's taken once a day. Biggest side effects that I see that people are concerned about is hair thinning. So it can cause hair thinning within 1 to 3 months after starting the medication, but after that time period, your hair should go back to where it was in the first place. It can also cause headache, nausea, diarrhea, increased blood pressure. It can cause tuberculosis reactivation. So that's a screening lab that we have you do for the teriflunomide to make sure that you have kind of you don't have exposure to the tuberculosis. You don't want to take this medication if you are pregnant, plan to become pregnant. So we do a lot of counseling about if you were to start this medication and you are of childbearing age, using adequate contraception. And also we would check pregnancy tests as well if you are of childbearing age. One thing that's unique about the teriflunomide, can be compared to some of our other MS medications, is it can be eliminated. So using cholestyramine or activated charcoal, over an 11-day period, you can eliminate the medication. It does have drug interactions, so if someone's on warfarin or rosuvastatin, we may need to do some dose adjustments. And then we talked about the hair thinning, and then also using contraception as well. So this is just an example of if someone was to take activated charcoal or the cholestyramine for several times a day. So 3 times a day for the cholestyramine, twice a day for the activated charcoal. Over 11 days, the amount of teriflunomide in your system will go down to 0. You just kind of have to continue taking the medication. Let's say you don't take the activated charcoal or the cholestyramine. The teriflunomide actually recirculates in your bile, so it's still in your system for at least 6 months after the last dose. So if you're switching to another medication, a provider may want you to do an elimination, or if you have side effects, an elimination may be appropriate as well. Next, we have our S1P modulators, which are fingolimod, siponimod, ponesimod, and ozanimod. These are oral medications you take by mouth. You take these once a day. Now, in terms of side effects that we kind of see more in practice, you may have a headache after starting, which typically goes away after a period of time, perhaps a couple of weeks, musculoskeletal pain, nausea, and diarrhea. One of the things we do for screening is an EKG. So we want to make sure that you don't have too low of a heart rate or abnormal heart rhythm. So we want to, before we want to start these medications, we would do an EKG to make sure that your heart is doing well and in the right rhythm as well before starting an S1P modulator. Something very key about this medication is called disease rebound. So if you're off of this medication for a certain period of time, after taking it for a while, it can cause a rebound of MS. So you want to make sure you don't just abruptly stop the medication, that you talk with your provider about it, see if there's another medication you should transition to while coming off of this class of medications. When we do lab monitoring, we check your complete blood count, we check your liver, we do check for your history of having chickenpox, which is can be reactivated as well. So we will do a chickenpox screening and see if you have the antibody to it. And then, as I mentioned, we'll do an EKG at baseline. And then the ophthalmologic exam, which is an eye exam, is recommended for some medications in this class. Some you have to have a certain condition in order to need the eye exam as a screening. But we make sure we review your medical history to see if you need an eye exam, to see if you have any issues with the macula part of your eye. In the counseling point, so again, if you need to discontinue this class, very important, it can cause that rebound effect, so let your provider know. There's also something called a first dose observation where you would take the medication and then your EKG would be monitored for a certain period of time after. Only a couple of these medications require that. So again, we would have to look at your cardiac history and which medication you're on to see if you need that first dose observation. And then if you need contraception, we recommend it during treatment and at least 2 months post discontinuation. Next, we have one of our higher efficacy oral medications called cladribine, or brand name Mavenclad. This treatment course, trying to put it simply, is you would take 2 courses of treatment. So you would do month 1, and then you would do month 2, and then you would repeat that in a year. And then from there, your provider would kind of monitor your MRIs to see if there's any disease activity. So based on your weight, let's say you are on treatment course 1 and maybe 4 to 5 days of tablets that you're taking. And then again, month 2, based on your weight, it'll be 4 to 5 days of the tablets you're taking. And then we'll repeat your weight in a year to see how many you require. Some common side effects you see with cladribine are headache, nausea, and back pain. There's quite a few labs that we need monitored before you start, so we need to make sure we do your screening labs to make sure that you have appropriate antibodies to certain things like hepatitis, for example, HIV, and then you have appropriate like liver enzymes and kidney function. So there's quite a few things that we monitor. Again, we do the chickenpox antibody as well. If you start on cladribine, it's recommended to separate it from other oral medications by at least 3 hours. We want to make sure there's no absorption concerns. So we're just those 4 to 5 days, we just want you to separate it from your other medications by at least 3 hours. Make sure you wash your hands after the dose is taken. And then we don't want to start it if you have severe liver or renal impairment, which is your kidney. So we'll do that screening lab as well. And then the contraception recommendations is to use contraception during treatment and for at least 6 months after the last dose. Next, we have alemtuzumab, or Lemtrada is the brand name. This medication, kind of like the cladribine, kind of has a shortened cycle. So it's an intravenous medication. You take it daily for 5 days, then daily for 3 days, 12 months later. But you can have subsequent courses if needed. There's a very high risk of infusion reactions. So I think the incidence is over 90% risk. So that might look like a rash, headache, fever, nausea, vomiting, muscle pain, itching, and fatigue. There's quite a few screening labs to do before you would be able to start the alemtuzumab. You do get pre-medications before the infusions to help minimize any reactions that might occur, and you're monitored for 2 hours after the infusion. It does require monthly blood and urine tests for 48 months following the last course. So for in total, you will have to do the lab monitoring for 5 years from when you first start. And then for contraception, you would want to use it during treatment and for 4 months after the treatment course. And here, there are quite a few warnings and precautions that come with the alemtuzumab, some that we're aware of when the trial was occurring, some afterward. So we just want to make sure, like, if you were to start on this medication, even though it's a very effective medication, we want to make sure you're doing that lab monitoring and letting your provider know of any concerns or adverse effects you may have from the alemtuzumab. Even if it's a couple years after your infusion, there's a possibility of some adverse effects to occur. So if there's anything that you feel is abnormal, make sure you check with your provider to see if it could be attributed to the alemtuzumab. Next, we have natalizumab and its new biosimilar called Tyruko. The natalizumab brand name is Tysabri. It's an intravenous medication that's given every 4 weeks. Common side effects are headache, fatigue, and muscle pain. I know there's a concern about PML, and we'll talk about that. And then we want to make sure we're looking for any liver toxicity and infections. We monitor the JC virus antibody to determine someone's risk of PML or progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. So this is the JC virus can convert and become PML. So we want to make sure that someone's risk is negative or low. So we'll make sure we monitor that JC virus antibody every 6 months to ensure that risk is very low or minimal. If someone starts an adalimumab, observation is recommended for 1 hour post-infusion for the first year after starting. And there's also a risk for developing antibodies. So if someone's taking this and let's say you've been tolerating the infusion really well for a long time, and then all of a sudden you start having infusion-related reactions, please let your provider know because there's a way to test for antibodies and see if maybe your body might be like rejecting the natalizumab. So just to make sure that, your provider's in the loop if you start to have kind of some unexplained infusion reactions that you hadn't had before. This MS rebound comes back with this type of medication. So we talked about it before with our S1P modulators. It can also happen with the natalizumab. So we don't want you to abruptly discontinue it. We want you to kind of continue on. And if you need to switch medications, let your provider know because it may need to be transitioned to another medication. Now, a little bit more about the PML, or progressive multifocal leukoencephalopathy. It comes from the JC virus the JC virus, which is a common virus. So how it works is PML will happen when the JC virus mutates. It'll gain access to the brain, and then also having the changes in your immune system from the natalizumab can kind of be like the perfect storm for developing PML. So if your JC virus antibody index is low, then the risk is 1 in 10,000 chance of developing PML. If it's high, then it goes, the risk goes up. So now it's like 1 in hundreds is a chance of developing PML. So again, it's not a lab you want to forget to get drawn. That's something we're monitoring on our side as well, just to make sure that we have a good assessment of what your risk is for PML. Next, we have ocrelizumab, or Ocrevus. It's a brand name. It's an intravenous medication. It starts with half the dose of 300 milligrams, 2 weeks apart. Then the full dose, 600 milligrams every 6 months. There's a risk for infusion reactions that might include itching, rash, fatigue, shortness of breath, flushing, fatigue, or headache. Of course, there's a risk for infections as it's an immunosuppressant. In the original trial, there were a couple of patients who developed breast cancer, but they haven't seen any increased risk or flag for that since the medication was approved. It can cause Hep B reactivation, so that's something that we monitor for. And a newer incidents that they've seen of adverse effects is with colitis. So if you start developing abdominal pain or anything like that, please let your provider know. We monitor these labs that are listed for ocrelizumab before starting, and then periodically we'll do something like the complete blood count, check immunoglobulins as well over time. You get pre-medications to help minimize any infusion reactions. You're watched for an hour afterward. If you were to have a reaction, it can occur up to 24 hours after the infusion occurs. So it may not be during the infusion, but could be after for up to 24 hours. And contraceptives is recommended during treatment and for 6 months after the last infusion. One of our newest medications that I spoke about earlier is ocrelizumab with hyaluronidase, brand name Zunovo. So this is a subcutaneous 10-minute injection into the abdomen. So the total amount is about 23 milliliters. It occurs every 6 months. In terms of injection reactions, it can be local, so itching, swelling, redness, and pain. It can cause systemic reactions, so like nausea and headache. Again, kind of the same types of warnings as the Ocrevus, so the infections, breast cancer incidents, and the hepatitis B reactivation and colitis. It has the same lab monitoring. All right. Next, another one of our newer medications is ublituximab, or brand name Briumvi. It's 150 milligrams, with the first infusion being 4 hours. 2 weeks later, you'll get 450 milligrams over 1 hour, and then you'll continue to get 450 milligrams over 1 hour every 6 months. It can cause infusion-related reactions, kind of similar to the ocrelizumab. And then we have the risk for infections and Hep B reactivation. Again, this looks a little familiar to the ocrelizumab in that we have a similar lab monitoring and screening for the ublituximab. You do get pre-medications with each infusion. You're watched for an hour, particularly after the first 2 infusions. The reactions can again occur up to 24 hours post-infusion, and then contraception recommended during treatment and for up to 6 months after the last infusion. And then rituximab, or Rituxan, it also has biosimilars under different names. Now, this is not an FDA-approved medication for MS, but you may see it for people who were on this medication prior to the approval of ocrelizumab and have continued on, or it's for someone who didn't tolerate another medication, maybe they've tolerated the rituximab. But typical dosing is 1,000 milligrams 2 weeks apart, then 1,000 milligrams every 6 months. There's a risk for infusion reactions. It works in the same way as the ocrelizumab. So like similar risks, so infections, Hep B reactivation, so there is similar lab monitoring. And then same thing where you'll get pre-medications, post-infusion observation, and then there's also contraception recommendations as well. Now, ofatumumab is in the same class of medication as the ocrelizumab and also the rituximab. So this is a self-injection, so it goes into your fat. It's administered over about 10 to 15 seconds, and you self-administer it. So you receive the dose at weeks 0, 1, and 2. You skip a week, and then you would begin every 4 weeks starting on that technically 5th week, but if you start on week 0, it would technically be week 4. There's a risk for injection site reactions, also local reactions, so like erythema, which is redness, pain, itching, swelling at the injection site. And it can cause more systemic effects, kind of similar to the infusion, so fever, headache, muscle pain, chills, fatigue. It can have a risk of infections as it's an immunosuppressant, Hep B reactivation, and reduction in immunoglobulins, so we'll monitor those. The recommended injection sites for the ofatumumab are the abdomen, thigh, and outer upper arm. If you are receiving this medication, it's refrigerated. You want to make sure the medication reaches room temperature for about 15 to 30 minutes. So you want to take it out, and then 15 to 30 minutes later, you can inject. Some providers recommend pre-medications. Our practice does. Not every practice does, but at least for the first 3 injections, we have people do pre-medications in order to help prevent those reactions from happening with those first 3 injections. And then contraception is recommended during treatment and for 6 months after the last dose. Here's just a graph of the risk for injection-related reactions. You can see that the highest risk of injection-related reactions are with the first, really the first 2 injections, but we'll have patients do the first 3 just to be sure in terms of taking pre-medications, but you could just see the drop with the ofatumumab in blue over time with the risk and the incidence of systemic reactions from happening. So it should become better tolerated the more injections that you receive. Okay, great. So that was probably the bulk of the presentation there. I know there's a lot to review, but side effects are kind of the main thing that I get asked about with these medications. So I want to make sure to include that. So the next question that I get commonly is, what does high efficacy versus low efficacy medication or disease modifying therapy mean? So here's an example. So one of the main things we look at is reduction in relapses. So when we look at relative reductions, let's say we're comparing 2 medications, we want to know what's its relative relapse reduction. And we also look at absolute relapse reduction, but the key is relapse reduction. If we look at the glutathione or interferons, for example, we see an 18% relapse reduction, 33, 29, 34. So we would consider these are lower efficacy disease modifying therapies. Then as we get to the oral medications, we might see, a higher relapse reduction. So we have 53%, 54%. Our lowest efficacy medication that we use, which is teriflunomide, is 31%. But I will say, even though some of these are lower efficacy, we do have people who have been on them for a long time without having a relapse. So it's not to say you'll 100% have a relapse on these medications. Sometimes we just need to find the right fit for the right person. So even though I say it's lower efficacy, it may work for you long term. So that's one of the main things we're looking at is relapse reduction, especially if somebody has relapsing remitting MS. And on the right, we also look at disability progression. So we want to make sure that these medications are preventing disability progression, which they typically do. With relapsing remitting MS, but main thing we're looking for relapsing remitting is how much it impacts your relapses. Then we look at some of our higher efficacy medications like cladribine. That has a 55 to 58% relapse reduction versus and siponimod is 55%. You see as we get further along in the approval process, so over the years that these medications have come to the market, we see more and more effective medications in preventing relapses from occurring. Some more examples, so the alemtuzumab, natalizumab, ocrelizumab, so these are our higher efficacy disease-modifying therapies. We don't have a medication that is guaranteed to be 100% effective, but I think we are headed in the right direction in terms of getting higher efficacy medications to continue to prevent the disease relapses from occurring. So here's kind of a chart to kind of simplify this. So I know there's so many options for disease-modifying therapies. So on the left, often our infusions are associated with higher efficacy disease-modifying therapies, so like natalizumab, which is Tysabri or Tyruko, ocrelizumab, now the Zunovo option, so the subcutaneous ocrelizumab, ublituximab, the ofatumumab, so the one that's in the self-injection in the same glass as the ocrelizumab and ublituximab, and alemtuzumab. And then possibly considered high efficacy. Sometimes we're looking at the numbers and the trials, and some people consider them high efficacy. Some don't, but at least moderate efficacy. We have the fingolimod, siponimod, ozanimod, ponesimod, and cladribine. And so I'd probably say as a group, you are in at least the moderate efficacy, if not the high efficacy for these medications. So how do I pick a medication for MS? So there's just a lot of components to how do I pick the best disease-modifying therapy. So one is, how does the medication work? Do I want a medication that's immunosuppressant? Is there one that's immunomodulator that changes my immune system without suppressing it? What have I tried in the past? So sometimes you may have had a relapse on medication, but so we may not want to try another one in that same class. how is it administered? Do you prefer to take something by mouth? Do you want to take something daily? Do you want to take an infusion that's every 6 months or monthly? Are you okay with the self-injection? You can do it at home. So I think it comes down to personal preference as well in terms of how we want to know you're taking the medication. So how will you best pick a medication where you'll know you'll be consistent with administering it? Frequency. So like I mentioned, do I want something daily, every 6 months, every month? So I think frequency is a factor as well. Some people really focus on the efficacy, so they want the highest efficacy options in preventing relapses. Some people look at the risk. So what is the safety information? We know what's been on the market the longest. And then also risk for side effects. So what type of side effects could happen, what have happened, and what has happened in the past. And do I want to try it, see if I have side effects, and then if, I don't tolerate it, maybe try something else. So I think there's a lot of components to it. It's not sometimes a crystal clear answer, but I think having this discussion in conjunction with your provider will help you guys come to a good decision on what medication might be best for you. Will MS medications help my symptoms improve? So no, so this is not the goal of the MS medications. So they don't help improve symptoms. The goal is to reduce the risk of having an MS relapse, delaying progression of disability, and limiting any new inflammation in your central nervous system. So really, I consider these medications like preventative type medications. Now, it is possible to have a partial or complete improvement of symptoms, but there may be symptoms that are permanent, but we want to make sure you're taking medication in order to prevent these occurrences from happening. So, excuse me, do I have to take a disease-modifying therapy for MS? So disease-modifying therapies, these are the best proven therapies to help prevent relapses again and slow progression. Some people may not be on treatment. So some people may not want to be on treatment, may have other conditions that are of concern with having MS and other treatments that conflict with the MS treatments. Some may have low disease activity or MRI activity. Sometimes it's hard to tell what your actual activity level is. So that's something to discuss with your neurologist to see if they feel like you have a high level of disease activity currently or in the past, or what your risk might be. For coming off of disease-modifying therapy and having a relapse. Also, as you age, so we found that people who have longer-term disease inactivity, so less activity, now they're in their 60s, 70s, it might be a consideration to maybe come off treatment. But again, it kind of depends on your history of MS, what your disease activity has been, what your MRIs have shown, what disease-modifying therapies you are on. So as you get older, it might be a good time to have a discussion with your provider about kind of risks and benefits of being on a disease-modifying therapy. And this is just a chart that shows kind of where we want people to be. So the orange indicates a relapse. Now we want to, what could potentially happen is you have this blue line here on the kind of left side of the chart where you have active disease, but not with any clinical symptom worsening. Then if you have a relapse, you could be in the red section, or you do have worsening of disability. So let's say you have a new symptom that's permanent, for example, so you have more disability. Our goal is to get you over here to the star where let's say you have a relapse, let's say you're on medication, and you're stable without activity. So that's where we would like someone to be, is being stable without new MRI activity. And what if I want to become pregnant? So let your provider know if you're actively trying to become pregnant or if you'd like to in the future. Because you have MS does not mean you cannot become pregnant or have a family. So that's certainly a very reasonable goal, and I think it's a good thing to have a plan working toward that. There may be medication decisions that can change based on family planning. If you plan to become pregnant, again, let your provider know and figure out a plan for after you deliver, what would be the plan and timeline for resuming your medication. And then also discuss, let's say you're on an infusion, whether pre-medications are appropriate, or if you're on symptomatic treatments for MS symptoms, whether those are still appropriate while you're pregnant or after. And then Duke has a really great website called Preg MS. The website's here. So if you want more details about medications that might be appropriate or inappropriate, and kind of the thought processes you might want to think about when you're planning to conceive, that is available on this website. And what supplements are recommended for MS? So biggest one, most important one is vitamin D. It does support the immune system in response to infections, helps with inflammation and regulating the immune system. So this is kind of the main supplement we'd recommend. It would be good to have your level checked to determine the appropriate supplementation dose. And then also, we can also get vitamin D from the sunlight, food sources, but sometimes people have low vitamin D levels. It might need like a prescribed dose or an actual like tablet or capsule to supplement over the counter your vitamin D levels to get them to a sufficient level. And what type of research is currently happening with MS treatments? So we have our BTK inhibitors, a new class of medications. It prevents overactive B cells from attacking myelin. Here's an example of one, fenebrutinib. So we're waiting to see the outcomes on the BTK inhibitors, but it would be a new class of medications for MS. Stem cell transplant. So having a stem cell transplant will reset the immune system to prevent it from attacking the central nervous system. So we're looking for outcomes currently on whether the stem cell transplant is an effective modality of treatment for MS. And then another one called vidofludimus calcium. It's a potentially neuroprotective medication. It's currently going through clinical trials. So we will see the outcomes from that. So a lot of exciting things happening with MS research. And finally, what resources do you recommend to help with medication costs? So even if you have insurance, medications can still be unaffordable. Some people may not have insurance or may be kind of underinsured. So even generic options that are covered by insurance could be expensive. So here's just a list of options for you to review. So if you have commercial insurance, so anything that's not government related like Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE, or the VA, you can use a copay card if your brand name medication is approved by your insurance. Utilize the MS Society navigators. They can help navigate insurance coverage questions. It's something called a tier exception that some insurance allow you to do, where you can get the medication covered for a lower tier cost, but you would have to do an authorization completed by your provider's office in order to get that. Medicare Extra Help for people who meet the income requirements. There for symptomatic medications, you can look at the $4 list at Walmart or other discounts at pharmacies. There are free medication or patient assistance programs for brand name medications usually that you can apply for. So if you want to call the manufacturer support services of your medication, they can let you know if there's one available and then kind of what the application process looks like. There's foundations that open and close during the year, so you can see if they're open. So for people who have Medicare, there's Patient Access Network, Healthwell, Nord. These are good websites to look at for foundation assistance. If you have a SHIP program around you, I believe every state has them. You can call them and they can help talk to you about medication coverage options. Again, usually for people with Medicare. And then we use Mark Cuban Cost Plus drugs. They do have some generic medications available. You don't have to use your insurance, but it's for like a discounted price. So if you wanted to review that site, they have some options that may be more affordable than your insurance might be. And that is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you for having me today. I hope I provided a good review of side effects, common questions that I receive about disease-modifying therapies. And thank you and have a good rest of your day.
I was diagnosed August 15th, 2015. I want to introduce Dr. Brooke Rawls, is the CWEB Academic Coordinator and Clinical Assistant Professor at the University of Pittsburgh School of Social Work. Dr. Rawls graduated from Slippery Rock University, where she earned a Bachelor's of Science degree in social work. She later went on to receive her Master's of Social Work from California University of Pennsylvania in 2014. In May of 2019, Dr. Ross graduated from Robert Morris University with a PhD in Instructional Management and Leadership. Her dissertation focused on the impact of secondary traumatic stress, burnout, and compassionate fatigue on bereavement doulas. Dr. Ross brings with her more than 14 years of diverse experience within the field of social work. Her professional experience includes casework at the County Child Welfare Agency, medical social work, nursing home services, grief and loss support, individual, couples counseling, and teaching. Dr. Ross has over 7 years of leadership experience throughout managing hospital social work departments and providing clinical supervision to master's level social workers. When not at work, Dr. Ross volunteers for the Gateway Midget Football and Cheerleading Association, where she currently serves as a vice president of cheer. She also coaches for the Gateway Youth Track and Field Club and is certified official for USATF, USA Track and Field.
It's cold.
Is it? I'm glad I wore a big sweater. Yeah. Is this good, right? Not behind it. Perfect. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for reading the bio. It's always weird hearing about yourself, but I still appreciate it. So yes, I'm Dr. Brooke Rawls. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about social aspects related to physical illness and how it's connected with our mental health. I do see some familiar faces who may have heard this presentation before, so it's not cheating if you know the answers. I do encourage that additional level of participation. That's absolutely okay with me. This is a little bit interactive. There's a couple QR codes that you'll be able to scan to participate as well. I know this is being recorded, so individuals who watch it later can also participate. So I think that's a pretty cool function. But we're gonna talk about how our physical health can impact our mental health and vice versa. So this part of the presentation, it creates like a word cloud, and the idea behind it is to try to get an understanding of what we already know. So the question that it was gonna ask is, in your experience, how has your physical health impacted your mental health? So when you're not feeling physically at your best, when you're not feeling good, how does that impact you mentally or emotionally? What does that feel like for you? And I asked you to just share a word or two to describe what that feels like. So I don't know if it's possible if anybody wants to share, and again, if you've already heard it, you might already know some of the answers, and that's okay. Some ways that you feel emotionally when you're not physically feeling your best. Drained. Depressed, crying. Frustrated, absolutely. Irritable. Yep. Aggravated. Yep. So tired, depressed, aggravated, irritated. Sad. Yeah, so there is a strong link between how we feel physically and how we feel emotionally and psychologically, and that also goes both ways. So research tells us that 1 in 3 individuals who have a chronic physical illness also have a mental health condition, most commonly anxiety and depression, often related to our physical condition. However, that's also in the reverse. Those who struggle with mental health also in turn develop chronic physical illness. So looking at this next slide, it kind of tells us a little bit about the why in the different domains in that it impacts us. All right, so when we think about our mental health, right, those could be diagnoses such as depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia, high stress, right? Any of those mental health struggles can impact how we feel physically. And it can happen maybe because of genetics, right? Maybe we are genetically predisposed to getting some type of mental health illness. It runs in our family, right? when we have mental health struggles, it can impact our motivation, right? We don't feel like doing anything, especially the things we know we need to do to take care of ourselves, such as going to the doctors, taking medications, working out, prepping a healthy meal that we need to eat instead of just going through a drive-thru and getting something quick, right? Low motivation. Then we have difficulty with concentrating and planning. Again, it's hard to manage and arrange doctor's appointments that we have, obligations we have to our own health and maybe to the families that we're still caring for. It's difficult for managing things. And then that's kind of one of those double-edged swords, right? You feel bad and you feel sad and depressed because you're not able to do those things, right? But then when you do those things, you feel drained and tired, and it takes all of the energy you have. So it's like going back and forth between your physical needs and your emotional and psychological needs. Then we have a lack of support, right? So when we struggle with physical conditions, when we struggle with mental health, sometimes our families, our friends, don't always understand what we're going through and where we're coming from, and it can sometimes cause a divide, a misunderstanding between what we need and even what they need. Sometimes we have family members or friends that feel like we're not capable of making changes, especially when we're talking about the mental health side, right? When we think about anxiety and depression, we hear things like, it's okay, it's not that bad, it's not that serious, you'll be fine, just get up, just push through, you know, once you get up and move around, you'll be fine. You know, it's that lack of understanding of what we're going through, and they feel like we're not willing to make the changes, so their support starts to draw back, right? Also, those with mental health struggles also are less likely to receive medical help, right? And this is also one of those double-edged swords, right? Because there's such a strong link between physical health and mental health that sometimes when you go and you talk to your doctor about symptoms that you have, they automatically contribute it to your mental health. Oh, you're just anxious. Oh, you're just tired. Oh, you're just depressed, right? Where there really may be a physical element, a physical condition that is causing these additional symptoms, or vice versa. Physically, you're not feeling well, which is causing some of these emotional and mental concerns and issues, and through the doctor, it's okay. Well, you know, we don't expect you to be at your best because you're dealing with X, Y, and Z, and it's not taken as serious as it could be. So the impact of physical health and mental health is so closely aligned that it's difficult to navigate and it's difficult to manage. So one of the things that we recognize is a common factor, right? So what is a common factor between physical illness and mental health, right? Everybody deals with physical illness and mental health differently, right? Again, anxiety is different, depression is different, other mental illnesses are different, depending on your specific diagnosis, depending on pre-existing conditions, depending on genetics, everything might look different, but there's one thing that's common between stressors related to physical health and mental health. Does anybody remember or know what that common factor may be?
Body's reaction.
I'm sorry?
Your body.
Your body's reaction, yep. But what is our body reacting to? Stress. Moving to the next slide. Chronic stress, right? If you are dealing with a physical illness, that is stressful. If you are dealing with a mental health issue, that is stressful. If you are alive and breathing, there's probably something that is stressing you out, right? Because stress is a part of life. There is no way to avoid it. But what we have to do is we have to learn how to recognize the effects of stress and what it is doing to us. We also have to be able to recognize stress in others, right? So we can recognize, you know, that the stress in others as well. And once we learn how to recognize it, then we can learn how to cope with it. I'm stressed. Stress is a part of life. It's not going anywhere. So now what? What can I do? First thing is we have to recognize that stress can be both constructive and destructive, right? Stress gets this really bad reputation and is always typically classified as bad. I'm stressed. Stress is a bad thing. You don't want to be stressed. Where in actuality, there is good stress and there is bad stress. both types of stressors have a similar impact on your body. However, mentally, how we look at it can change our view and our perspectives of life and the situation. It can help us guide through that stressor. So, bad stress, stress that is intense, frequently, and poorly managed, is what can be personally and even organizationally damaged. However, the good stress, looking at the next slide, is eustress. There's actually a term for it. Eustress is good stress, right? So stress that, or situations that cause you stress but have a potentially positive outcome. Maybe you got a new job, right? Getting a new job is stressful. You gotta learn people's names, you gotta learn the programming, you gotta learn where you gotta park at. It's stressful. But as people say, that's a good problem to have. That's a good stress, right? Welcoming a new family member, that's through marriage. That may be a good thing depending on if you like them, but that's a good stress to have, right? So there's good stressors. It doesn't change the fact that it impacts us, but when we look at it and see it as good stress, it can help change our perspective. But then there's bad stress, de-stress. Those are things similar to loss of a loved one, loss of a job, right? Significant changes that doesn't have that positive outlook, right? So those are negative stressors. If we classify and we look at every stressor as the same, it's going to impact our body the way that it would. However, our ability to manage it and navigate through it is going to become more complex and make it more difficult for us to overcome. Stress isn't necessarily bad. We need stress in our life, right? Too little stress can lead to boredom. That means you're not being challenged. That means you're not motivated. That means there's no growth. So we want to be stressed, right? However, we want to recognize good stress for good stress, understand de-stress, learn how to recognize and know the difference between them both, so that way we can learn how to navigate and manage it. Symptoms of stress, right? So I keep talking about how stress, regardless whether it's eustress or de-stress, is going to impact or can impact our body. These are some of the common symptoms associated with stress. So you may be looking at these different ones and you might say, oh yeah, when I'm stressed, I have an upset stomach and I have some anxiety and tension. You may look at these slides and you say, you know what, I've had every single one of those when I've been stressed out, sometimes all at the same time, right? So when we talk about understanding stress and being able to recognize it, I had taken this neuropsychology class. I'm not a neuropsychologist, but it seemed interesting, so I took it. And we talked specifically about these symptoms and the why we have these symptoms when we are stressed. And what I learned is that the part of the brain, this beautiful, complex organ, right? The part of the brain that houses our defense mechanisms, right? Or flight, and freeze response systems is the same part of the brain that activates when we're stressed out, right? So when you're feeling stressors, your body automatically activates that part of the brain and starts to prepare to either have to fight, freeze, or run, right? And when that happens, it's the 3 F's: fight, freeze, and flee, or run. Yep. Yep. So you're either fighting your way out of the situation, you're running away from the situation, or you're hiding from the situation, right? Those are the typical 3 defense mechanisms that we have. There's another one they added called fawn, but we're not going to go down there right now. But either way, so that part of your brain gets activated. When it gets activated, it's like simultaneously within milliseconds, your body starts to prepare for having to do one of those 3 things. The first thing your body does is redistribute your blood flow, right? It's like, okay, we need to move your blood to the areas that's going to be needed to help you fight, run, or freeze, right? So blood leaves your fingertips and your toes, right? You don't need the extra blood flow in your fingertips and toes, right? So when you get cold, clammy hands, when you're stressed out, that's from the blood leaving those areas of your body, right? It also leaves your stomach, because you don't need to be digesting your food, your lunch that you just had, if you have to run or you have to fight. So when you get that drop in the pit of your stomach, when you're anxious or you're scared, a lot of the times that's the blood leaving your stomach. Wow. But then the blood starts getting redistributed to different parts of your body. So it's going to your heart. And you get that racing heart when you're stressed or when you're scared. That's that extra blood flow. When the blood flow goes to your muscles that you may need, your upper body, your arms, your legs. So that's why a lot of the times when you're feeling stressed, you start to get tense, right? That's all that extra blood flow that rush to those muscles to help you if you need them. And then it goes to the brain, right? Vital organ that you need. So you have this extra blood rush into your brain. However, the brain is also going to protect you from too much blood. So you have extra blood rush into your brain. At the same time, you have blood vessels in your brain constricting, getting smaller to be able to control the amount of blood flow going to your head. That's why you sometimes get that throbbing headache. Extra blood, more constricted blood vessels to control it, and you get that stress headache, that throbbing headache, right? So a lot of the times when we're stressed, these symptoms come on, which stresses out even more. Like, oh my goodness, why is my heart racing? Why are my hands cold and sweaty? What's going on? And you get more stressed out, so the symptoms get worse because you're losing more blood flow to those areas, and it gets worse and worse and worse. Which is why understanding why this is happening is key. And we often use different techniques to help with this, and we don't understand the why. Who's ever used a stress ball before? All right, so there's a common misconception that stress balls are there to help you control your anger so you don't hit somebody, right? That's why people think, like, I'm gonna squeeze this and I'm gonna take my anger and frustration out on this instead of somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not gonna say that isn't helpful, but it's also to naturally help you start redirecting your blood flow back down to your hands. As you squeeze, you're putting pressure. Think about when you give blood, right? You're doing this so that way the blood comes back down to this area. Stress balls have the same intention, to help redirect your blood flow. So you're telling your brain, no, I don't need this extra blood to all of these different parts of my body. I'm okay, I'm just stressed. I don't need to fight, I don't need to run, I don't need to hide. I just need to breathe, I need to redirect my blood flow, it's gonna be okay, right? So next time you're feeling stressed and you have these symptoms, acknowledging where they're coming from and why is extremely beneficial, so it doesn't lead you down that spiral of continuous concern, and you could do things to get that blood flow back redistributed to help lessen the symptoms. It's not going to necessarily go away, it's not necessarily going to be immediate, but over time and practice it will get a little bit better. So looking at the next slide, so I don't know if this is going to work. We can try. So this is a stress scale that was created by Holmes and Rahe. It may work. We might not just be able to see it together on the next slide. But what this is Holmes and Rahe found that high levels of stress, if you function on high levels of stress for a long period of time, it will eventually lead to a physical health breakdown. And so what they did is they came up with a list of a ton of different normal life stressors that we experience, and they put a number to it, okay? And basically what they say is based off of that number, if you continue to function at that high level of stress for so long, eventually it's gonna impact your physical health. So you should be able, has anybody tried, is it Access?
You can access it, I just can't access it.
You can't show it. Okay, so what we can do is we can take a moment, if you go back and you click, if you have your phones, you can scan the QR code, and it's gonna pop up with a few questions of whether you've experienced this or not. Now, if you have experienced some of these, they may be a little bit triggering because they're life stressors. I think like the first one is if you've lost a spouse. That can be triggering if you have. These questions are to be answered within the past 12 months. So it's if you've experienced these events in the past 12 months, you hit yes. If not, you hit no. When you answer all of the questions, it's then gonna give you a score. And that score helps predict your physical health breakdown if you do not intervene or navigate or manage the stressors that you're experiencing. So as you're taking it, you're gonna see eustress and de-stress, right? Because regardless of whether it's good or bad, it impacts the body. So you're gonna see things like starting a new job, getting a promotion, gaining a new family member. You're also gonna see loss of a loved one, loss of a job, incarceration, right? Negative stressors, de-stress as well. And at the end, you're gonna get a score. So I'll give it a couple of minutes for those who want to do it, and then we can kind of talk about what your results mean specific to you. I think there's like 42, but they're all yes and no's. So not too bad. I think there's 42. I know, right? Only 42 life stressors, really? Oh, good. So the way the quiz is built is when you're done, it'll give you a score. Because it's a quiz, it says like right or wrong. There's no right or wrong. Just pay attention to the number that you get once you complete it. All right, so as you're finishing up, I want to kind of go over what the results mean. And I'm going to preface, the purpose of this is not to stress you out about your stress levels. Okay, that's not what we want to do here. But it should, once you hit submit, it should give you, add it up for you and give you a number. Yep. All right, so if your score is 150 or less, you have a very small chance of encountering or suffering from a physical health illness related to your stress levels. Good. That was good. I wish mine was under 150. If your score is between 150 and 300, you have a 50% chance of experiencing a physical health breakdown within the next 2 years if you don't manage your stress, okay? If your score is above 300, you have an 80% chance of experiencing a physical health breakdown in the next 2 years. Now, again, I don't want to stress you out if you scored high. The idea behind it is, again, to recognize your stress levels, right? They're not all bad stressors. Some of them are good stressors. Remember what stress does to the body, and then find ways to navigate and manage that stress so we don't have that physical health breakdown. So when we look at these next, we're gonna skip, I think, the next one, we're gonna talk about how we can manage our stress. So as a social worker, one of the things that we recognize is that when we look to treat someone, even ourselves, we have to look at the entire person, right? We can't just focus on one aspect of our identity or who we are. We have to look at everything. So we use the biopsychosocial spiritual model to help us do that. And basically when we're treating or we're providing an intervention or we're even doing self-care for ourselves, we make sure we do it across every single one of these domains. So the first one being biological. So we take into consideration our biological or our medical needs, right? We think about our age, our gender, genetics. We think about our physical health or physiological reactions. How do we specifically respond to stress and what that can look like for our body? We pay attention and we take into consideration our psychological needs, our mental health. Do we have any mental health illnesses? Diagnosed or undiagnosed, right? We think about our emotional health. We think about our previous trauma and what triggers us. We think about the sociological aspect of our lives, our interpersonal relationships, our friends, our families, our enemies, right? All of those play a role into our social lives. We think about our social support dynamics, our friends, our community. We think about our socioeconomics, right? Our income, what that looks like. And then we also look at our cultural identity, who we are in relation to our culture and our connection to our culture. And then the last one is spiritual. Now, spiritual always before was included in the social aspect, which is why you see it as the biopsychosocial model. And more recently, we actually gave spiritual its own model because we understand how important spirituality is for a person. Right? Their identity, their meaning, their purpose. I'm not just talking about religion, I'm talking about that belief in something greater than us, our philosophy in life, and having a connection to that and doing things to feed our spiritual needs also helps our body. So I know the first part of the presentation is a little stressful, a little bit dark, talking about stress and what it does to our body and what our stress scores are. So for the second part of the presentation, we talk about what we can do about it, how we can manage it, what we can do for ourselves to decrease the impact that stress has on us, to help create a better separation between that physical health and that mental health, and treat our entire body. So we're gonna go through each of these models and talk about things that we can do to better support ourselves on that aspect. So first, we're looking at biological, right? What can we do to support ourselves biologically? So things we want to consider, existing medical conditions, right? What are our specific medical conditions that need attention? We think about nutrition, right? What's going on nutritionally? What should I be doing? What am I doing versus what I should be doing in terms of my nutrition? Think about current medications, and we think about medical compliance, right? Are you able to do everything your doctor's recommending? Why or why not? And then we think about, okay, now that we've examined these medical considerations, what additional supports can I put in place to make sure I'm taking care of my biological needs? So we think about routine medical follow-up. We think about preventative care. We think about medical education, right? Coming to events like this, doing research and learning about your specific diagnosis, what's out there, what clinical trials may be there, what medication and their efficacy rates, right? All of that provides that additional support on that biological side. Case management or nurse navigation, right? Understanding that we can't know everything on our own, and we need additional people in our lives that can help guide us and inform us on things that exist. Physical therapy and occupational therapy and assistive devices. These are all things that can help support us on that medical or biological side. Looking at the next one, the psychological considerations. So we're thinking about any previous mental illness that we have. So first and foremost, I always like to preface that mental illness is not a weakness. I know in many communities, especially Black communities, it's not okay to admit that we have something mentally going on with us. We just talked about all of the things that stress us out, right? And we talked about how physical illness can lead to mental illness and vice versa. It is a part of life, and just like any part of life, it can be managed and it can be navigated through. So we have to recognize and understand if we have a mental illness that may be making our journey a little bit more difficult than it already is. Or emotional intelligence, right? Being able to understand our emotions, our reactions to life, as well as being able to understand the reactions of others and the emotions of others, right? Because how other people react and respond, it could be related to us and our journey and what we're going through. It could be their own life stressors. We often take that in and it impacts ourselves. So learning how to regulate the emotions of others and respond appropriately in a way that's still good for us. Our history of trauma and our coping skills, whether they are effective or not effective, positive or not positive. We all have coping skills that we've learned throughout life, right? Some of them are better than others, right? We've all went on shopping sprees that we probably didn't need to, or ate the food that we knew we shouldn't have, right, as a coping mechanism. But being able to understand what our coping mechanisms are and why we have them. Additional supports to help us through this, right? We have individual therapy, right? Therapy is amazing. I always say everybody should have a therapist. Therapists should have a therapist, right? Somebody that we can talk. Huh?
You said therapists should have a therapist.
100%. If you talk to therapists, a lot of therapists will tell you that they at some point have been in therapy themselves. Everybody has stressors. Everybody has their own life situations. Everybody has circumstances that sometimes feel too heavy. And everybody needs somebody they can tell that to, who's non-judgmental, who's there just to listen and guide should you want that guidance, right? And that's what therapy is. Support groups, talking to others who kind of get you, right? They're never gonna get you 100%. So you never wanna go into a support group saying they're gonna know exactly what I'm coming from, because everybody's journey is different. But knowing you could talk to somebody who somewhat gets it, that's been through a similar journey than you, is extremely beneficial and helpful. Online communities, the emergence of online communities has been extremely helpful and beneficial for a lot of people who maybe don't have the ability to go out of the house, who don't feel comfortable in social settings like that, right? To still be able to network and communicate with others. Now, I always put the cautionary there with online communities. You want to do some research, you want to make sure it's legit. You want to make sure it's well monitored, because unfortunately there's people who feel safer in an online environment to say hurtful and harmful things. So don't just join any online community, but when you find one that's right, it can be very beneficial to you. And then self-care, doing things to take care of yourself, doing things that make you feel good. And we're gonna talk about this a little bit more, but I'm talking about embedding this into your daily routine and making it a priority and not feeling guilty about it, That's what self-care is. It
Yeah,
is.
it is.
It is. Because you're always like, there's a million other things I should be doing
Yeah.
than this. But
The other people I gotta take care of.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
yes, exactly. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about that. Social considerations, right? So things we want to think about: our family supports, our friend supports, our significant other or others, no judgment here, our community supports, and our cultural influences, right? So things we can do: family therapy, right? Family therapy is important, okay? Because we kind of already hinted at this. We want our family members to know and understand what we're going through and the impact it has on our lives. But to increase our emotional intelligence, we also want to hear from our family members and what that means for them and what that looks like for them. And sometimes what our illness or our mental health does and feels like for them. So that way we could have a mutual understanding of each other's needs and we could come together to support each other. And that's what family therapy will help do. Community programs, right? Being involved in the community and the supports and the information that they provide. DHS navigation, that's a whole stressor in itself, trying to navigate services provided by the Department of Human Services. But having somebody who can kind of help walk you through what benefits may exist for you if needed and if qualified. FMLA and workplace benefits, right? There are tons of benefits to the workplace. A lot of people are hesitant to reach out to out of fear that their employer will know that they're struggling with things. But a lot of them, especially through the insurance, offer some type of case management, offer a health coach, offer a nutritionist and things like that, that are through your employer benefits that you may have access to. And then financial planning resources, right? Finances, in my opinion, and I'm probably sure there's research on it, will always be the number one stressor for people who are alive, right? We stress about finances. That's top one. When I did couples counseling, I said the top 3 reasons that couples fight are finances, kids, and sex. Those are the top 3 reasons that they fight, right? Finances are always up there on the top. So having financial planning resources, although in that moment will be stressful right there, trying to break down your income, your finances, your expenses, that's stressful, so a lot of people avoid it. But in the long term, it'll help get you in a better place where it alleviates those stressors. So having some type of financial planning will actually help in the long term in this area. And then the last one are spiritual considerations. So moving to the next slide, we look at those religious beliefs. We look at our church community if we're a part of one. We look in our belief in a higher power, and we look at our spiritual connections with whomever or whatever that is and what that means to us. So when we look at additional supports for that, we can look at it on the individual level and we can look at it on the societal level, right? So individual level, we have prayer and meditation, and we also have reflections, right? Reflecting on our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our perspectives on life and the why. And then we have the societal level, relationship building with others, building a deeper connection with others, intimacy with others, to be able to establish that core connection and root ourselves in just being human, right? Then we have stepping out in faith. Sometimes when we're dealing with physical health and sometimes when we're dealing with mental health, there seems to be a disconnect with our spirituality, and we have to remind ourselves in whatever faith, whatever you believe in, to trust in that, right? And not to be afraid to trust in your faith and to put things into your faith and be okay with it. And then service to others, right? Giving back to others is a huge part of connecting with our spirituality. Whether it's participating in groups or online communities and sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your perspectives to be encouraging or to be informative makes you feel good too, right? We don't do it just because it makes us feel good, but we understand the benefits that it can have on us. So looking at the next slide, when we talk about we need to do something for us, we have to make sure we do it for us on every single one of these domains of life, okay? And I'm gonna give you guys an example of what this could look like. And I'm gonna be very vulnerable for a moment. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. All right, before I got here, I feel like I had a complete panic attack all over what I was gonna wear today. All over what I was gonna wear today. So, and I keep forgetting this is gonna be on the internet, but whatever. But it's one of those situations at this point in my life, I haven't packed up my summer stuff yet. So I'm living out of bins of my winter stuff with all my summer stuff all over the place. And I have this presentation, it's the weekend, my husband's out of town, he's taking football players to the West Virginia game, so it's just me and my teenagers. And I'm like, I don't know what I want to wear. They said business. What does business even mean anymore? I don't even know where any of my sweaters are. And thank you for whoever complimented me on my outfit today. That really, you didn't know it, but yeah, but that helped. So I'm literally sitting on my basement floor around my bins. My stockings had a hole in it, so I'm like, I'll wear my tall boots so they can't see that I don't have stockings on, right? I can only find one boot, right? So then I'm like, maybe I'll wear pants. I'm like, but I wanted to wear a skirt. So I'm like sitting on my basement floor, like almost hyperventilating over what to wear. Like, I want people to take me seriously. I want to look nice. This is gonna be live streamed. I don't know, and I was really about to have a panic attack. So I had to sit there and think, like, okay, why? Why are you feeling this way? Why is this so important to you? Why are you really like on the floor about to cry over what you're gonna wear? Like, this is like ridiculous to me. And so I had to think about, like, okay, this can't just be it. Like, what else is going on in my life? And I'm like, okay, I'm about to do a whole talk on this. Like, you should know better. This is why therapists need therapy, right? I'm like, you should know better. And so I'm thinking, like, okay, well, what else is going on right now? Well, my husband's out of town. I got the teenagers. I have a 13-year-old that can only understand half of what she says half the time because she talks in acronyms, I feel like. I have a 15-year-old who got suspended from school because he's stealing pizza from the cafeteria. And we give him lunch money. I don't understand why you have to steal pizza, right? Football and cheer, we have our banquet tomorrow. I gotta give a speech. And I'm just thinking about all of this stuff going on. And I'm like, okay, so this isn't just about what I'm gonna wear. What am I gonna do about it, right? What do I need to do about it? Because either way, I gotta get dressed and I gotta leave the house in like 20 minutes. So I gotta come up with a plan. And so I think about the biological needs. Like, okay, so my hands are a little sweaty. That's one of my telltale signs that I'm stressed out and I'm sore. I'm like, all right, so that's a stress response. That's normal for you. It's okay. Just wipe your hands off because you gotta go through these bins of clothes to find what you're gonna wear. It's all right. Psychological, relax, all right? It's okay. It doesn't matter what I'm gonna wear. If they're paying attention to what I'm wearing, they're gonna miss the message, and I don't want that. But at the end of the day, I'm there to give a message, not to go to a fashion show. Nobody's judging me on what I'm wearing, but I had to remind myself of that. Psychological, I call my mom. I'm like, Mom, I don't know what to wear. I'm giving this presentation. What should I do? You know, and I let her talk me through it. I use my supports to help kind of regulate me. My interpersonal social, so that kind of mixes with my psychological, but I was able to kind of reframe my perspective. And guess what I did? I told myself, you know what? I'm gonna use this in my presentation. This is a great example. And then that kind of went into my spiritual, right? My giving back, my higher power. This is happening to me for a reason. No, this isn't high level. This isn't catastrophic. This isn't a major event in my life. But then I ask myself, if I continue to function on this high level of anxiety for a long period of time, what would that end up doing to me? And then I think about those symptoms of stress, and I think about the impact it would have on my physical health. So there's this book that I read, or that I recommend on stress management. It's called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's a really good book. And I'm gonna share with you the preference of this book. So it's Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's talking about kind of like the natural order of life and, you know, nature. And it talks about, you know, there's a lion and there's a zebra. When there's an encounter between a lion and a zebra, there's only gonna be two outcomes. Either the lion's gonna win or the zebra's gonna get away, right? Those are the only two outcomes you're gonna have there. Yeah. Now, why zebras don't get ulcers is because if the zebra gets away, guess what that zebra is not gonna do? It's not gonna sit there and stress about the next time that lion's going to attack. It's gonna go on grazing the grass. It's gonna go on to the watering hole. It's gonna continue living its life until that next attack happens, and then it's gonna have two outcomes. We as humans, we don't do that. We hold on to that stress, or we sit there and wait in a bubble of anxiety and a fear of when that next attack is going to happen. And we let it simmer and we hold on to it and we function at those high levels of stress for so long that it impacts our physical health. And then it gets so blurred that we no longer remember which came first, the chicken or the egg. Am I physically ill because of my mental health? Or is my mental health flaring up because I'm physically ill? I don't even know anymore because I've been functioning so high without finding a way to manage and navigate it that it all becomes one. So the goal from this presentation is for you to think about your own specific self-care plan. What works for you? What can you do across each of these domains of life to be okay and navigate your physical illness, navigate your mental health, and reduce your chronic stress? So biologically, psychologically, interpersonally and socially, spiritually, intellectually, right? Go on to the next slide. I think I had another word crowd, so that's fine. So,
You said that's fine.
yeah, that's fine. We've been doing good without it. So the next part, so I want you to kind of think about some things that you do that work, and we're gonna share. And it could be things that worked or didn't work. I think last time I shared like hot yoga with goats on your back is not for me, but it might be for you.
You did it?
It might be for you, and that's okay. We don't have to talk about my previous life experiences right now. But it's a real thing, and for some people, it really, really helps. And the point of sharing self-care tips and techniques is learning new things and trying new things, and knowing that sometimes what we've always done isn't gonna be what we continuously need. And it's okay to try something new. So does anybody wanna share some things they do in the name of self-care across one of those domains that they feel is helpful?
Self-care. Oh, go ahead.
It's been incredible. My husband passed away and my best friend passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And so I've been pulling it together. Spiritually, I needed that chart though. But I decided I would come here today and get with other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Start to get my life back moving.
Yeah.
I thank you for doing that, for coming and knowing that what you're dealing with.
I gotta
and
get
what you're
moving. I
dealing with.
can't sit in my rocking chair and be sad.
Yeah.
I
No.
have to get moving.
Yeah. So the first thing is to recognize it's okay not to be okay sometimes, right? We don't always have to be strong. And I understand, especially for Black women, that's not easy, and it doesn't always feel okay, right? But it's okay not to be okay, to sit in that space, but then, like you said, take the steps. Yeah. Well, there's no timeline on grief either. And again, I did grief and loss counseling. There's no right or wrong time to grieve, but it's learning how to grieve while still living, right? And you coming here is the first step to doing that, and learning how to manage and navigate through your current stressors, which is definitely commendable. And thank you for sharing that.
I thank you too.
I needed you guys. I
Me
needed
too.
you.
I love you, girl.
That community support is huge. It's huge. And just like what I said, like you complimenting my outfit, you didn't know what that meant to me, right? You have no idea what that meant to me, right? But just coming around, being around the community, talking, right? Giving back, being a part of something more than just yourself, getting support, even without them knowing why you need it, is helpful, and it helps regulate and navigate our stressors. You had your hand up too? Yeah.
I've been diagnosed for 30 years now. And of course, well, I'd say the first 10 years were just a rush for me mentally. And then, I don't know that I ever really, I don't know, I guess I accepted it and then, I don't know, the middle 10, I just accepted it. And now the last 10, I guess I've accepted it and kind of want to move on, move, do things, you know. Anyway, my whole point is that was, so, my daughter, she's 46, so we talk a lot. And she would say to me, because I was always, she said, I know this isn't easy for you. But when people ask you that, you know, do you need help, just, you know, take it, but stop trying to be so independent.
Yeah.
Stop trying to do everything all yourself. So the other day with the storm, I went out earlier in the day because I needed tires on my car. So I went and got the tires, the place I always, you know, I know where it's at. And coming out of the tire place for some odd reason, I turned the wrong way. So I called little Miss Sunshine and said, you know, when you feel like that, you know, accept somebody else in my car. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And of course it was a storm, which, you know, figured out, I was like, I'm lost in hills. You know, it's dark, I don't know where I'm at. I'm like, I'm getting off. And she says, you know what, Mom? I think this is the third time this month you've been lost. We're gonna have to talk about getting these keys off you.
What is wrong with us all?
I know, I know. I said,
That's exactly what I would've done.
all together and get yourself out.
Get GPS.
Yeah.
I have GPS.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
but it's great to know her, you know, it never tells you, like, it'll say, you know, show the terminal will say after.
Yeah, we'll say it comes you last minute.
Yeah, and that's tough, and the fear of asking for help because of rejection or not getting the help you need is hard.
It's like I'm laughing, I'm like, why did I even, what did I tell her?
But what that shows me, and what that could hint to, is the lack of understanding of what you're going through and trajectory of your illness and what needs to be done or could be done.
Really, it's really not that. We kind of, she gets, it was funny, like, you know, it's like this thing, yeah.
Okay, so it was more jokingly, or?
Yeah, but it
Okay.
was just like, it's like, why did I call her?
Well, you're here, so I'm glad you're not lost anymore.
That's when I figured out that this one was really dead. The reason I couldn't see was because the lights were out, and you know, I'm like driving around like 3 streets from home.
I was right there, but I did not recognize that corner store.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, the fact that you called and asked is a step in the right direction, because oftentimes we don't call and ask, and you might not have gotten the answer that you wanted, right? But I always say eventually something's gonna change, right? But the fact that you took the strength to call.
Let me also add this. She lives in Newcastle, so it's not like.
She couldn't come drive down the street.
It's not like she could come and get me.
Yeah. So she's like, I'll just lighten the mood and say we have to take your license. I mean. Oh.
I had an incident, like that, it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before yesterday, I believe. Yeah, it was the day before yesterday, 'cause I don't remember what yesterday was, but it was the day before yesterday. My caregiver, I had to go to the grocery store to pick up a few items. Well, that's where my caregiver took me. And so we're there, whatever, and so I start getting overwhelmed because everybody is in the grocery store all at the same exact time I am. Like, come on, guys. I know it was Thanksgiving. I didn't realize that until after, but it was just a simple fact that everybody was in the grocery store. They should have been at work, not at the time I was there. Like, come on, I purposely picked this time just so you guys weren't there. But everyone went to call off of work or whatever, and I'm like, yeah, that storm. Of course, people would sit there and not come. But yeah, so I was totally overwhelmed inside the grocery store. It's like I started forgetting my list. My caregiver was like, okay, it's this, and she was like, look at me. She was like, it's only us in the store. I was like, no, there's not. I appreciate the fact that she tried to keep me, calm, but no, we're not. There's obviously everybody around us.
Yeah.
So how the heck, forgive me for cursing, how the hell you gonna sit there and say that?
Yeah.
And that's one of those situations where I break down, okay, was that de-stress or eustress? Right? Or we categorizing all of that as bad stress, but what was the positive in there? Right?
I found positive, but she did try to sit there and
No, you're at the grocery store getting items that you need. You have the means and the ability to do so, right? You have somebody with you for support, which is not always an option for everyone. And at the end of the day, you're gonna get what you need for your home. Everybody
And I
else,
forgot a lot, so it's okay, I didn't get everything on support.
there are still some things that we
Which is
forgot.
pointless.
That sounds like a typical grocery store when you get everything except for the main reason that prompted you to go to the store in the first place, right? Of
I was
course.
supposed to get lunch meat. What the heck? You can't make a sandwich, all I have is cheese and lunch meat.
Yes.
It's like Kevin Britain, they,
Yep, one more.
I could just go on forever.
Yeah. All right, so some self-care tips, right? So when we think about things that we can do to take care of ourselves, and again, talking about it, laughing off situations that weren't really funny, but we have to change the perspective or it's gonna drive us crazy, right? Coming with a plan to move forward to take care of ourselves. So the thing about self-care is a lot of times when we think about self-care, we envision like this whole weekend trip with massages and mimosas and all that type of stuff. That's not always realistic for everyday needs. So it's sometimes about incorporating little things into our lives every single day that makes us feel good. And I always say the two things you want to remember, the two P's. Make sure it's purposeful and make sure it's powerful. I am doing this for me because I like it, because I need it, and it's going to make me feel good, and I'm not going to feel guilty about
So
it.
when I'm ticked off at my daughter I live with, and I go upstairs into my bedroom and cry and watch TV,
That's self-care.
That's good.
Yes. It's good to cry and let out those emotions. It's good to set boundaries, and that's setting a boundary and getting space.
And I keep
Now,
thinking like, what the hell, I can't make it perfectly, you know, like I can't just move,
yeah.
cause I can't afford to. I keep thinking, yeah, I just like, and forgive me for this, but I just like to put my hands around her throat.
Yeah. Now, the thing with that is the need for escape and doing something to relax you is important, it is needed. But when we talk about those other domains and we talk about family therapy or we talk about communication, that's still important or it's gonna keep happening.
Family therapy in our family? In our family? She is right.
I've been saying this. I've
And
been
the
saying
one
it
that
for
needs it
4
the
years.
most is the one
It's
that's
not, no, it's
refusing
all,
the
it's all of
most.
y'all, it's all of
And I
y'all.
said to
It's all of
Lonnie,
you. It's
I
all of
will
you.
go
It's
to
all of you.
therapy.
It's all of us. Not even all
Yeah.
of you guys, but it is all of mostly you guys. And that is mostly y'all. It's mostly y'all.
And the
But-
thing about the great thing about
You're the
therapy,
one that asked us to go.
Of course I did, because it's therapy for me.
We figured, you said, oh, I want you to come for me. You didn't say you guys are all nuts and you need to talk.
the beauty of therapy, the beautiful thing about therapy is it doesn't always have to be all or nothing, and it doesn't have to be you have to jump in 100%.
Right, and that's why I
It
told
can be
her I'd
incremental.
go.
Yeah. And
And
something,
I-
and it maybe starts with individual therapy and then progresses the
And
family.
then my
There's
oldest
levels and
daughter
steps.
said, well, what if we go and we're talking about what we're supposed to be talking about,
they're very
and we get
defensive.
mad at each other, and we are going at each other, then we're all gonna be so ticked off, none of us are gonna talk. I said, no, somebody is there to help you
Yeah, and anger
and through
and
it.
being mad, kind of like stress, is one of those emotions that get a bad reputation, right? It's like, oh, don't get angry, oh, don't get mad. That is just as an important and strong and vital feeling, just as happiness and sadness and confusion, right? Everybody wants to avoid the anger, but that's a natural part.
And that's
of
why
the
she won't
process.
go, and I think another reason she
No,
won't
it's
go.
because you guys are defensive and like.
No, I'll go. I might be defensive.
What did I say? She
once
said no.
And
I will
defensiveness
go.
is that part of the brain that activates, that creates our stress response system and creates our fight, flight, or freeze. And sometimes when we get defensive, it's our brain automatically telling us that something's, oh, I'm stressed, this isn't okay, I'm worried, I don't know what I need to do. I need to either be defensive and fight, or I need to run away and escape and hide, or I need to just stand still and not do
I
anything.
think my
Because it's
oldest
all the
daughter,
same
I
part of the brain.
No, we're not gonna talk about it. We're not gonna talk about it.
All right,
We're not gonna talk
so
about it.
thinking about self-care
It's not
techniques,
me,
right?
it's her.
We're not gonna talk about it.
Therapy, definitely recommend it for everyone, even for myself. Maintaining that balance of work, play, and rest, right? There has to be a balance to life. We can't work our way through our struggles. We can't play our way through our struggles, right? We can't just focus on that sociological side of things and be out with friends and partying and all that type of stuff and ignore all of the other domains of life. and we have to rest, right? We have to sleep, we have to relax, we have to go upstairs, watch a movie, read a book. That's all important. So finding that balance. Scheduling regular breaks. Taking a break isn't a sign of weakness, right? It's a self-care, it's a coping strategy. That is okay to take a break, take a rest, relax for a little bit and not feel guilty about it. Be involved in creative ideas, stay active physically, whatever that looks like and means for you. It could be just deciding to take the steps instead of the elevator. It could be, getting up and moving around as much as possible. It can be just sitting there and moving your arms or moving your legs as much as possible. It could be participating in physical therapy and occupational therapy. It can be whatever physically active means for you in that moment, and know that it may change. And then listen to your body, right? If that's not the day, it's not the day, right? Your body's not gonna lie to you. You can reflect, right, and think about why that is and get a better understanding, but make sure you listen to your body. And then of course, seek help sooner rather than later, whether it's talking to your physician, talking to a nurse navigator, talking to your family, or talking to a therapist. Because with all of these stressors and how it impacts our life, nobody is meant to do it alone. It just makes it that much more challenging. So it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to talk to people about your struggles, and it's okay to be vulnerable, because a lot of the times when you're vulnerable, there's a lot of beauty that comes out of it, and a lot of acceptance, and a lot more understanding than you thought there may have been if you kept it within. And so the last slide is just my contact information, I think. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, another QR code. I love QR codes. I used to do paper, and then one time I dropped it all on the wet ground. I was like, I'm never doing paper again. Just everyday challenges. But yeah, so this is me. I love talking with people, having conversations. Any questions, thoughts, concerns, needs, please reach out to me. I talk way too much. You can see I'm like 5 minutes over in this presentation. Feel free to reach out and just converse if you would like. And thank you all for your time and having me today.
Thank you.
Thank you. See, now I'm hot though, so I was moving around too much. I'm like, I should have wore a thinner sweater.